Right, morning everybody. Welcome to Hardware Center. We are going to do the introduction to routers for today. We're on a live stream as well, so pity for the guys that are back at home and sitting in bed or in the lounge or having whatever, breakfast and a cup of coffee. We've got a fairly big audience here today, which is quite nice. So I hope there's a big audience out there. For the guys that are joining us online, please, if you can log in, and then it'll enable you to obviously ask questions or post a comment or one of your snide remarks that you normally put out there. So we welcome them all. Okay. For the rest of the team that are here today and the folks that are here today, nice to see you all. Some familiar faces and some new faces. If I don't recognize you, it might be something else that I don't recognize you. Okay. All right, good. So without further ado, quickly, I think just for the program for this morning, I'm going to obviously be starting now with the training, and then I'm going to take a break probably at about 10:15 so that we can just get a cup of coffee and so on. And it also just gives me a minute to collect my thoughts to go on for the next session. So it's a fairly long theory session, okay, but it's an enjoyable one. And please, I think you've gathered by now that I'm an easy person to speak to. I'm not sarcastic by any way. I'm not rude. I don't make bad comments. I don't insult people. So please ask me a question. If I can't answer it, we'll find something that can. Maybe Google or one of the AIs will probably assist us. Okay, and let's see if that does happen. Okay, all right. So we're going to press on. So I'm going to do the presentation with you. There's a lot of things to learn. So I take it that the reason why you're here is because you're interested in getting on with routing. Okay, I think it's been a bit of an anomaly for you. Some of you guys have used your routers, I believe, and you've looked at this thing and you thought, no, hang on a minute, let me rather get someone to talk to me about this or tell me something about it. So this is a pure theory. There are practicals that follow on after this, and that will certainly put you in good stead. Okay, so some of you may actually be pro-router people, and you're probably sitting here to see if I missed anything. If I did, please point it out, okay? All right, so let's go and have a look at it. So that's the first one. All right, brought to you by Hardware Center. Okay, that's me. And then Festool is the main sponsor for this morning session. And then some of the other tools that we'll have on board and demonstrate to you and just show you, or basically just show you what these tools are all about. Okay, good. Just to point out, we are doing workshops during the course of the month. I obviously am doing this one this morning, but the next workshop is next week, and that'll be the sharpening workshop. So for the guys that have always struggled a little bit or not familiar with sharpening, and I'm talking about basically your chisels and your planes, okay? So, and those are the two main things the focus will be on. So my good mate Dylan will be taking you through the sharpening process. So it's worth sitting down, a couple of hours of somebody giving you some theory in terms of what you should pay attention to. And then also you can field and address your questions or concerns, because maybe you have tried sharpening and it hasn't worked out for you. So there's some very simple little questions that come out, and they have a very simple answer. It's just, sometimes it's the way it is, and you think, okay, all right, I was overthinking it, and it wasn't that necessary. So please have a look at that one. It's also, I believe it's a free session as well. Okay, good. All right, okay, so first, before we start anything, I'm a bit of a safety nut, okay? Unlike some of my mates here in the audience. I'm not looking at anybody's particular. Folks, with regards to safety, it's high on my agenda, okay? I take that into consideration whenever I'm in my workshop, to always wear my safety kit. And I think those of you maybe have got these nice modern watches, you'll know that it always comes up and it says that the noise has been detected, it's over a certain dB, and that will remind you to put your ear defenders on. You shouldn't be reminded to put your safety glasses on. In fact, you should always be wearing them in the shop, okay? It's always that one-off chance that something goes wrong. So take that into consideration. So let's just go through them. So the first one is obviously eyes, okay? I mean, that speaks for itself. You don't have those, you're not going to do pretty much else, okay? You're going to look in one dimension, I think, and it might work out for marking things a bit more accurately, but nothing else will help you, okay? But you need them, okay? And I think for those of us that are, a little bit more silver than me, is that possible? You'll know that your eyes also just go south at some point, okay? No matter how good they were in the early days, they're going to move in another direction. So, look after them. It's a valuable investment. I mean, as you move on, it becomes more and more difficult. Lighting becomes more complex. So you need bright light and you need a good pair of glasses and, to see what you're doing. Otherwise, you just frustrate yourself. You're not achieving the quality of, or the level of quality that you would like to have achieved. Okay, so then the next one is the ears. Okay, so ears is the next important one. And why I say ears is that, you do get used to noise as an individual. You get used to noise. But the problem is that no matter how used you get to noise, it's still damaging. When it goes over a certain dB, it's going to cause a problem, okay? And a lot of the times, the problems only manifest many years later. So those of us in the young, good old days, and we were in Rocky Street or in Jeppe or whatever, and we went to the clubs, we'd come out and our ears were buzzing, and that was the party. I think we're paying that price today, so that zinging's come back again. It's now a little bit more permanent. It doesn't disappear that quickly. So, look after your ears. There's good ear defenders out there. And if you can't really afford a good pair, those little, and there's always this debate and argument. I always say any protection is better than no protection. So even if you get those little plugs that you put in your ears, well put, that'll work for you, okay? So, do make an effort to use them. I've got my ear defenders in the shop, and I put them on. So again, it's up to you whether you want to add Bluetooth to listen to music and so on, or a podcast or something like that. I tend to stay quite focused in terms of what I do. If I want to watch a podcast, I'll watch that when I'm relaxing. I can hear the podcast properly and concentrate on it. So I don't want to listen sort of half measured and then get half an idea of what's happening. Okay, so everybody's different, but the main thing is use ear defenders. Okay, right. Then the next one is, so this is the biggie for nose and lungs. There's this massive thing going on at the moment with regards to dust control and so on in the shop. The stuff that you see is not going to kill you. It's the stuff that you can't see that's going to kill you. So over the last couple of years, there's some very good woodworkers internationally that we've lost. And it's all due to the reason of a new form of cancer, nasal cancer. And they've picked it up. It manifests itself predominantly in woodworkers. It's that small, fine particulate dust that you're picking up and you're inhaling, and that's lodging, and that's what's causing the problem. So it's nasal cancer that comes into play. So the guys that are sitting here, you know what I'm talking about. You've been pushing it in the workshop over the weekend to make something for somebody. On a Sunday night, it feels like you're all congested in your nose, and it feels like you're suffering from hay fever. You may even believe that you've got a form of hay fever. But it's in fact those particulates that are now irritating your sinuses, and that's where the process is starting to work on you. Running off to the pharmacy and getting a decongestant is not the solution. Okay, I can assure you that. And you should tell your doctor exactly what you're doing when you do go and complain about your nasal passages blocking up. You need to use a mask, okay? So again, there's cheap and nasty, and there's very good, but they all go up in price according to what you purchase. So just simply put, from the COVID days, we used to get those, what's the normal doctor's masks? They came in blue, predominantly blue, and then they had the black ones. So what? It's still an interface. It's a barrier between the dust and your lungs. It's not a perfect insulator or separator, but it's going to at least mitigate some of it, all right? They're fairly cheap. I mean, at Take-A-Lot, you can get them now for about 30 Rand, I think, for 50 or 100 of them. It's worth that bit of money. So I have them in the shop. I might go through two of them a day where I will work with them. Please, when you use your masks, put it, the other way around so that it's face up, so the dust doesn't lie on the inside of it. And then when you put it on, you actually are compounding the problem. You're not actually improved it. So, and if you do something like that, you'd rather just throw it away. Okay, it's, at that cost, I think it's negligible to look after your house. So please take that into consideration. I know it's a bit of an irritation to put these things on all the time, but over time it will pay off. And then also I can tell you something. It gives you a bit of a facelift. So it supports your face. So you can see. I mean, for my age, I think I look pretty okay. So it proves the point. So take it into consideration. Okay. All right. Now the next one is feet. Okay. Now look. Horrors of horrors when you watch those videos and the guys walking around in a pair of flip-flops. Eh? And you look at this and you say, no. The odds are against you. It's going to happen. I mean, I dropped a chisel about 3 months ago on my safety shoe, and it hit the cap. And it did. It made a proper cut into the chrome leather. So I'm thankful I had them on, because it would have just slid straight through. I've heard horrors and I've seen horrors. So you're saying, okay, but there's not a couple of tons that are going to fall on my feet. No, listen, safety shoes are not like they used to be in the day of old. There are some really nice looking shoes out there. They are so good they don't even look like a safety shoe. And then the other thing is they've got Kevlar caps on them. They don't have a steel cap. Steel condensates when your feet sweat. So when you take the shoe off, the shoe feels soggy over, and wet. Kevlar doesn't do that. So if you get Kevlar ones, there's no condensation inside. And when you take your shoes off, they feel dry. And the other thing is that the soles on these things, you can stand. I basically stand almost 8 hours in my shop, and I get no fatigue whatsoever on my feet. Where a cheap pair of safety shoes, or even if I go into the shop in my normal regular footwear, I can feel it after an hour or two that my feet are starting to fatigue. So again, it's all about making your environment comfortable and good for you and safe for you. Okay, so bear that in mind. All right. All right, if you go to any of the safety companies, it's not the low bottom end range. So the 350 Rand shoes are not the ones that you want to get hold of, okay? But if you normally speak to the guys there, they will guide you because they've got the upper range. There's that common half boot. I don't know if anybody's wearing anyone. That half boot safety shoe. I think Johnson's makes them, if I'm not mistaken. That's a pretty good one to use. Say again? Yes, also a good brand. So again, I cheat a little bit. I'm not familiar with all the local brands. The only one I've got that's local is the Leroy Merlin safety shoes, and they're the ones that got a Kevlar toe cap, but they go anything from about 1,200 up in price. But you can stand all day in those things. They're oil resistant, slip resistant, they're everything resistant. Okay, so they really work well. I normally get my stuff from abroad because I need white soles or a light colored sole, because if I go to a client, they don't want you leaving a black mark across their beautiful flooring, so if I do happen to make a scuff, then it doesn't leave a mark behind. Okay, so I tend to purchase those. I think you guys have seen me with my shoes. They look more like a sandal than they are a safety shoe. So they're all right. They're comfortable for me, and I enjoy them, okay? So, yeah, but shop around. It's really worth the effort, okay? So it's a bit of an investment. So, Father's Day, Christmas, birthday, those are the things. When they say, they don't know what to buy for you, well, now you've got the answers. So let them grab a bit of kit for you, okay? All right, then hands. Okay, so the hands is another debate all on its own. I have a pair of gloves in my van. I have a pair of gloves in the shop. I never wear them. The only time I would ever wear them is if I'm going to collect timber from, say, for example, one of the timber yards. And somebody's going to help me carry it. I don't know how the guy works. So then I'll put the gloves on, because if he breaks and I've got that piece of wood in my hand, that's going to happen. Splinters are going to come in. But for the most part, I don't wear them at all. And I would advise against you using gloves in the shop, no matter how good they are, how thin they are, whatever the case may be. And I've seen this firsthand where guys have worn gloves and they're on a miter saw and it's grabbed the glove and whatever's inside the glove has gone with it. On table saws, on jigsaws, the most safe tool in the shop. A jigsaw wrecking a guy's hand because he had a glove on. So that means those teeth catch that glove, and whatever's inside that glove is going to go with it. So I highly advise against that. Take it, wear them when you know you've got a nunu busy helping you carrying stuff or timber. Okay, because that's where they come in. And generally speaking, if you do work with wood, you're not going to get that much in the way of splinters. I don't know the guys who are here that work quite regular with wood. I'm lucky if I get it 4 times a year, get splinters. About 4 times a year. And if I do get them, I get them proper. It's a proper job. They've got to be basically cut out, okay? So that'll give you the idea. But and maybe while I'm thinking about it, one more comment to make. If you ever work with melamine and you're building something out of melamine, when those melamine boards come back to you, say for example, you sent it off to people to have it cut and they come back to you, those boards are razor sharp. I know the number of times I've cut and sliced myself on that melamine. But you'll learn. You've got to put your head in melamine mode so you can work carefully with it. That might be a good time to put gloves on, because I've been cut a couple of proper times on that stuff. Okay, so, and I don't even, sometimes you get that cut and you say, I don't even want to look, and then you look and there was nothing. It was just friction more there. Then you're blessed. But if it wasn't, it's a decent cut. Okay, so just be careful. Don't be afraid. Just be cautioned and forewarned. Okay, and that'll make it easier for you. All right. Okay. Then aprons. Okay, so aprons like these kind of things. Cloth or leather. I'm okay with that. Wear them if you will. I don't really use them in the shop. The only thing I'd like to add is if you do wear an apron, please don't do a chef's knot. And that's the knot in front of you. I think that speaks for itself. You don't want your router to pick it up, or you don't want your drill to pick it up. You don't want your table saw to pick it up. You don't want anything to pick it up. So make sure when you tie it up behind you. Okay. So loose clothing and jewelry and hair are things that you need to be aware of. Oh, again, I've also seen horrors and I've heard of horrors. So you can imagine if it's unsafe, if it looks unsafe, it probably is. Okay. So mitigate that. All right. All right. Then just to continue with regards to the safety checks. Okay. So this is something I just wanted to add in. And I know that for the most part, we grab a new tool and we take it out the box. It's a new toy and off we go, and we're going to swing it and we're going to play with it and we're going to do what we want. And then some things don't work properly for us and we get frustrated, and some of us have got a temper better than others, and then the thing lands on the floor or the wall or whatever the case may be. But meantime, it's all described to you perfectly in that fantastic manual. You know, a lot of technicians and guys came together to write up that manual for your benefit, and you don't want to read it, okay? Don't know why. You went to school, you learned to read, and you still don't want to do that. So it's difficult, I know that, but it's a discipline. Sit down and read the owner's manual. Just read the manual that you got that came with the tool that you've purchased and understand what it says. Even read the safety notices. Even if it says, don't pull the plug out of the wall if you're barefoot and standing in a bucket of water. You know, read that. It's a reminder of what you shouldn't do, okay? So, you know, you don't want to win the Darwin Award for these things. So please read these things, okay? And then most of the time, I mean, I always say to people, when you buy that kit, there's little gadgets that come with your router, and you guys never look at those gadgets. You only look at that router. And inside there's a couple of gadgets, and then what happens is a couple of weeks later, oh, I want to cut a circle. Geez, let me go buy a circle jig. And off you go to buy a circle jig, not realizing there's a pivot pin with a little circle jig inside the box for you. Learn how to use that. Oh, no, I need to go get a trim router because I need to trim the edging. Not realizing that you've got a little trim edging guide inside that box. And most routers come with that now. So if you have a look, you've got a couple of little toys that are thrown in there. Some manufacturers are better than others, and they'll throw a little bit more of an extra in there for you. They'll throw a little cone for centering and all sorts of things. Worth the money, but know what you've got so you can save a little bit of money down the road. Unless you're somebody who just really likes to spend money on tools, like me. But you need to read the manual, okay? That's going to help you along. All right. Make sure you've selected the proper bit that you want to work with. So this is just a couple of things I want to mention while we're going into the routers. Use the right bit for the job, okay? Make sure you do that. Now, you're probably saying, how do we know this? Okay, I'll take you through that, but it's a consideration. Make sure bits, clamps, and attachments and locking devices are secured. You know what? I'd often take a chance and I put the router on and I say, no. Put it down, get the clamp it down, take the cut, unclamp, turn it around, finish the cut. Do you know what? You're safer. The day you don't do it is where everything goes absolutely haywire. It's where, oh gosh. I should add another thing. When you make sure it's clamped down, please. The router bits that have got a bearing on it. Yeah, let me show you one. So here's a straight cutter with a bearing on the top of it, or the bottom of it, okay? When you put it into your router, that would be a pattern bit, and then it'll be a template bit if it was in the middle, okay? Please make sure that the little grub screw, or the cap head, is tight. Because if that comes loose, it's not going to be disaster. It's just going to mess your job up. And that happened to me about 3 weeks ago. I was doing the last run on a table, on a Douglas fir table, Oregon pine for the rest of you. Going down, some of the guys who are on the groups may remember the picture. Going down, and the next minute, I felt the router going in. I thought, oh, come on, what's it now? So I stopped immediately, and I pulled it back, and it just roused. It took out a nice sweet cut. So I had a look at the bit. Serious enough, no bearing. There's the bearing on the floor, and the little screw's missing. Okay, so luckily they one size fits all. Grab one off another one, and then put it on. I could carry on with the job. But now I also had to repair that little piece. You know, and that was another thing all on its own. But those are things that up your skills, how to fix up what was missed, okay? So, and I did that successfully. If anybody wants to see, I've got pictures on the phone, you can come and have a look at it, okay? But annoying. So please make sure those things are tight, okay? All right, so the same as the clamps. Don't seriously, don't put it down to chance. It's the day you don't need that to happen, okay? All right, make sure the router switch is off before connecting the power. Okay, now, a lot of the new and modern routers, you don't have to concern yourself with that, okay? If you, for example, if the power went out while the router was running and the power went out, if you plug when the power comes back on, you put the router back on again and plug it in, it's automatically switched off. I guess you've got to switch it back on its switch and then switch on again. But some routers, like that particular one there, that big blue one, can you see it, with the M3600B? It's got a little toggle switch on it. No, if that switch is on, and it doesn't show you what on and off is, you've got to know by the use of your router what is on and off. Whether the power goes off or on, if that switch is on, it's going to go on. So I heard a guy, he said that he bought this, the power had gone off, he thought everything was hunky-dory, took the router, put it on its side, but he had pushed it up against some wood. When the power came back on again, this thing crawled all over his table and messed everything up on the table. But yeah, it just fired up. And he had a 1/2-inch bit in it, a OG cutter in it. And that was big enough for it to just grab whatever it could along the road, and it just rolled around the desk. And he said it was like a nightmare. It's a horror movie. So now he's learned when the power goes out, now unplugs his stuff, So, but you'll get familiar with your equipment. But please make sure it's switched off. So even I do that. I know that my machines, you've got to trigger it, pull it to switch it on. I know that, but I'll still hold it with one hand when I plug it in. So if it fires up, I'm safe as anything. Because maybe it's pulled in or whatever the case, and it's locked. So I don't want to take a chance, okay? Right. Grip the tool tightly. Go white knuckle. There's nothing wrong with that. White knuckle will be good and safe for you, okay? But as you get used to your router, you'll know that you can go from white knuckle to firm and never relaxed, okay? So take your router. So if in the beginning, when you do go white knuckle, it's just your brain telling you, be safe. That's what that's what's happening. So just work like that. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Grab it, go white knuckle on it, and then you're going to route. Then I know that your safety glasses that you put over your glasses and your mask are now going to steam up the safety glasses, and you're now going to say, oh, this is getting frustrating. So then what do? You take the safety glasses off, and then you take the mask off because now you can't see properly, and then everything else starts compounding it. Sort yourself out. You can do that, okay, and get yourself in a position where you can work comfortably, okay. And of course, noise. These toys are not, well, the cheap ones scream like a banshee. And the cheap ones, you actually sometimes have to look to see if it actually took the cut. Okay, so, bear those things in mind, okay? All right, good. So then let's have a look. Gosh, so aprons I've done with you. Watch out, please, children and pets. When children and pets come into your shop, I don't allow people, when I'm busy working, I don't want anybody in my shop, okay? Can you imagine if somebody touches me and they startle me while I'm busy with the router? I don't need that, okay? So I can do without. So please bear that in mind, especially pets. If your pets are well behaved, fine. People have got cats that walk around the tables and stuff like that. You don't really want that happening when you're busy routing, but hopefully the noise itself will keep the pets away, okay? All right, make sure the bit is not in contact with the workpiece. This rule applies to everything that's got a cutter on it. Okay, so that'll be a jigsaw. If you put a jigsaw up against a piece of wood and you fire it up, it's going to jump all over the place. You fire it up, bring it up to speed, and then you introduce it to the wood. The same as with a miter saw. If you put a miter saw down on the piece of wood and you fire it up, enjoy the sparks, okay, because it's fun. You'll know that you must fire it up, bring it up to speed, and then you put your miter saw through. It's applicable to everything with a blade, barring a chisel, I think. Okay, but everything else with a blade, that would include a router. But you don't want to fire up a router bit with a bit against a piece of wood. It's also a nice experience, okay? But you'll never do it again, I know that. But please, just forewarned, okay? Right, do not force feed your router in any situation. What that implies is read your piece of wood. If you're looking and you want to sort of route an arris or a roundover on your edge, look at that piece. If there's any knots in the way, and in any case, why did you put a knot on that edge? Could you not have put the knot in the middle of the table and made it with a clean edge? Think about that from a design point of view. But there happens to be a knot on the outside. Sometimes we can't see the knots on the inside of the wood. So when you're busy routing, you'll hear it makes a particular sound. And as you go along, if it sounds like it's slaving or it's starting to work a little bit harder than it normally should, don't press through. Kind of just pull it back off and have a look and see what's going on. There could be a number of things. You could be standing on the cord that's not allowing you to move it forward. Okay? Yeah, no, it's happened there. You're standing on the corner, you're trying to push this thing. You don't know, your hands and your brain are focused on this, not on what your feet are doing. So that could be one thing. You're the nunu, okay? But you'll learn that quickly. Then it could be a knot that's hidden inside the wood. Or there's a knot in the wood, okay, that you can see, but you need to anticipate. So when you're busy going, you hear it change its tone, and you know that it's now busy putting a bit of energy to go through that knot. Now you know what's happening, and then you push through, okay? If you see sparks coming out of there, then pull back completely because something's in the there's metal inside there, and it's going to cause its own set of problems. So pay attention to what the bit's doing, okay? It'll tell you. The router will tell you. It'll talk to you, okay? So don't force it. Switch the router off, again, with the other point, if there's anything unfamiliar that happens. So in my case, where I was busy routing and the next minute like dipped, I thought, wow, what the heck? I stopped immediately. I didn't press on through. So all I did was I just had that little bit that it ran into the side. I just had to deal with that. Luckily, it was long enough that it caught the edge, so it wouldn't be able to go any further. So the edge, that little pin where the grub screw goes onto, acted as part of a bearing against the edge. It just went in slightly, so, but I still had to fix that up. So consider these things, okay? Then the last thing, I'm in a habit that when I'm finished working with my tools, irrespective of what it is, I take everything, I clean it and dust it off, and I pack it away. When I'm busy cleaning and dusting everything off, I look at my router bits. If they need to be cleaned, I put them in a cleaning solution and I leave them overnight, and the following morning I just brush them off and I pack them back in the box. On my router, I dust and clean everything off and I blow it out with a blower and I make sure everything's fine and take a damp cloth and quickly just wipe the cable down. And if a cable snags, that, and then I can see immediately what's going on. Okay, I hit it with the router. Now I need to do something about the cable, or do I want to do something about it? Do you understand? So when you maintain your equipment, you're going to know what's going on. And it's not, that's what, it takes you a minute to do that. It's not an effort at all. And of course, the longevity of the item is there. You know, when you're looking after it and maintaining it. I mean, I've seen some routers, I wouldn't even touch them. They look so bad. Okay, I don't even know they're safe enough to work with, you know, from an electrical point of view. So, and if you look at the electrical cable, it's got bundles of tape that's taped up all over the place, you know. So, yeah, just be careful. Okay, that's really what it boils down to. Okay, so a little bit of what you need to take into consideration when you start working with your routers. Okay, all right. So then let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at the meat part. All right, you've seen this before. Well, what is that? No, it's a router. It depends on where you are in the world. All right, it's definitely not what we're going to work with. Have you seen this? No. Tell you what, when load shedding was at its peak, I'm almost certain you would have loved to have had a machine like that. And in fact, this was invented by a chap, I forget his name, over 100 and something odd years ago. He invented a whole lot of machinery that could be driven by pedal power. So there were table saws and all sorts of a jigsaw type contraption. And this is the router table, as a matter of interest, because there you can see the router bit at the top. And I've seen that one of the machines, I saw it in Bremen at a university, a museum in Germany. And I actually saw the thing, and it was incredible that the guys had that ingenuity in those days. And then just shortly after that, everything started getting electrified, you know, and the world changed to where we are now. Now we run on batteries, I think, to the most part. Okay. So there was the first portable router that was manufactured and sold off, okay? I want you to have a look at this particular router. Just if you can read the print on that, if you can have a look at it. So the Kelly portable router, the way they market it reduces hours to minutes. Can you believe this? Now, in those days, you had the hand plane. So guys were using that and rabbit planes and so on to make the grooves and all that kind of thing. And suddenly this arrives where you can now take it by hand and then move this down the piece of wood. The wood doesn't have to move. You move it down the piece of wood and you can get your job done. The thing that always takes, you know, or gets me is this comment here. Operates on the bench with either one or two cutters. So it didn't just have one cutter, it had two cutters in it. I've never seen anything like that ever again after that. Never. Two cutters at high speed. It does the work, listen, so smoothly, no finishing is necessary. Hey? That's how they sold the router. So once you made the cut, now think about it, those of you that have played around with your router and you've made a cut, What did you have to do afterward? Nothing. Unless you burnt it, the wood. I mean, that's on you because you weren't going fast enough or the speed wasn't set properly. But I hope it makes some sense to you, and that's what a router does. It's basically, you do that edge with an OG, that little fancy pattern on the edge of a table. When you've finished that, you don't have to touch it with sandpaper. If you do the job properly, that's your job done. That's the last thing I do on a table before it goes out the door is I walk around and I put that edge on. But there's a bit of a trick to doing that, and I'm going to explain it to you. But does that make, but there you go. That's the first portable router. Okay, and then they followed on from there. All right, so there's the type of routers that we've got. And somewhere in that collection, you may even see your router, okay? Those are the more popular ones out there. And if you're thinking of purchasing a router, these are the ones that you should look at, okay, as an investment. There's good routers and there's bad routers. There's cheap and there's nasty and there's expensive, So for those of you that are interested in this, I'll put the presentation up on the Hardware Center group and you guys can then grab it from there. All the pictures and everything will be there for you. Okay, so there's the different routers. And I mean, as I say, the only one that we won't have here, I think, is this Porter and cable. Okay, we won't have that one here. But for the rest of them, we've got all the other router types in here. Okay, are there any questions on this? Please, if you've got any questions, just ask. Okay, if there's something you're not sure of or unfamiliar. Okay. All right, good. All right, so then we have a look at the routers. The first one is the typical ones that we have. There's two types. It's the fixed base and the plunge base router. Okay. So the fixed base router would be this one here, okay? And then the plunge base is that one there. In other words, you can plunge it. It's got depth stops on it. So if you have to plunge to, say, for example, 8 millimeters deep, then what you do is you set your plunge stops. The plunge stops are like on a turret there. They're sitting there. And then what you'll do is then there's a turret stop at the back or in the front. There we go. It's at the, here we go. There's a little bit of a turret stop that'll knock the top one, and then you rotate it. And it depends on the router. They generally go from 3 millimeters per cut. Some of them are 4 millimeters per cut. So you need to just check and measure what your router is capable of doing. Bosch's generally, as I know it, is 3 millimeter, and I can't speak for the other ones. They vary, okay? So you select the depth that you want. So obviously, you do the first cut. So you normally take 3 millimeter cuts at a time. You don't go deeper than that. And you make your cut, change the turret that does another 3 millimeters, plunge down to that, take the next one, so you're 6 millimeters deep. And then you may just want to set it for the last 2 millimeters on the second or the third turret. Normally the way to do that is just put a drill bit. Take a 2 millimeter drill bit, put it on top of the turret, put the stop on top of that, and it'll only travel 2 millimeters down. Okay, I think some of you have got it and some of you haven't, but go and look at it and maybe read up a bit about that. That's the easiest way to set it up, and then off you go. Job's done, okay? All right, so I'm making it sound easy, but I'll discuss it again with you a bit later. This is the fixed base. I like a fixed base, so I have a combination, something very similar to this, and I like the fixed base from time to time. So if I have to do a set of grooves that are standard depths, then I will use a 1/2 inch bit in that because it's got a little bit more strength to help me out. And I can plunge probably, and it's always a gamble doing these things, but I can plunge 5 to 6 millimeters on it. But you're just going to move steady with it, okay? And then I can do all the runs that I need to instead of having to change twice, plunge and then plunge again. So the fixed base does it nicely for you. But ideally, the fixed base, they also use to put it underneath a table. And then you can take your spindle. So this spindle can interchange. You can take the spindle out and move it to that machine, and you can change them around. So normally you get the spindle with the 2 bases, and that's the best buy to go for, okay? It's a bit pricey. If you're ever looking at getting your first router, that's what you should aim for, something that can do absolutely everything for you, okay? And then your investment's made. Anything else out of that, well, then you take it from there, okay? So something to consider. I'm not saying if you can, do it. If you can't, well, then you've got to take another approach, and we'll discuss that. So that's the biggest router. So this would be typically a router that can do all the sizes. So in other words, you can go from a 1/4 inch, which is 6 point something 3 millimeter. It'll do a 6 millimeter, 6.3 1/4 inch, 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 12 millimeter, and 1/2 inch. So it'll do all of them because you can get the collets for all of to go into that router. So no matter what router bit gets thrown at you, you will have the collet for it. Does that make sense to you? So you can cover that base. Then all the attachments that come with it, the tracks and the caddies that you can get, it'll fit into all of those things. So you can get yourself kitted out for anything that you need. That's the big investment. So something like that you can look at, okay, and consider that. Otherwise, you're going to have to try and jig things up and make them work for you, okay? That's the top end of the scale. And then the low end of the scale, is this one. Now everybody looks at the little trim router and they say, oh, that's so cute. I'm going to get me one of those. And we all did too, didn't we? Eh? We all got our Makita and we all got our whatever and our Bosch and whatever the case may be. Oh, because they're so cute. Eh? I can hold them with one hand and off I go and I do my routing and then you carry it on like that and you put a bigger bit in and you put an OG and you wanted to know why the thing stopped and you were getting more confident and things didn't work for you until you realized that, hang on a minute, this is like really a toy at the end of the day. And then you go up to the next step and you get yourself a proper plunge-based router, okay? And then you start working, you say, why did I not get this first? It's so nice to work. This is so comfortable. I don't have to worry about this little jiggly little toy. Look, it's got its place. Make no mistake. I mean, I've got a Makita that came in a cooler box. I think they still sell them, but now in a sustainer. In those days, they came in a cooler box. I bought that probably about 12 years ago. It's got every single attachment and gadget you can think of for that little trim router. But that trim router's been in that bag for probably about 10 years. I haven't taken it out of the bag. Now that I think about it, yeah, I don't use it anymore. I have no need for it. So, yeah, trim router, that's what it does. So look what it's showing you. There's laminate on a chipboard, and then the trim router busy trimming off that to make the edge nice and flush, okay? That gives you the idea. That's basically what they're geared for. But they're so cute, and they're so nice, and you can work with them, but they don't do the job, okay? They will, but not as good as a proper sized fixed base router, okay? All right, or plunge base router. All right, so this is what I would suggest if you are coming into the game and you need to get going, is that you get yourself a router. This is a mid-ranged plunge-based router. This has got everything that you need to work with. It works intelligently. Everything is there. Everything does the thing, what you want, okay? But let's just go through and just describe a couple of things. So basically, this is the anatomy of a router. All right, so it depends. Some of the routers may slightly change, but for the most part, most modern routers follow this design. So you would be standing here. Would you be standing here? Yes. You're standing this side, and then there's the front that goes onto the board is on that side. So you've got the variable speed dial. Some of them have got the variable speed dial on the handle, which is quite nice, because now you don't have to reach out to hold it with one hand and do something. You can now do it with your thumb. Scroll it with your thumb and set the speed up or down, depending on how you work, which I think is much nicer, because if you're busy cutting a piece of oak, and oak burns for nothing, you don't want to still pull back or something like that, or hold it with one hand and then try and change the speed. You want to try and control it while you on the side, and then just move past to see if you've improved on it, because if you've burnt it, you're going to have to sand it. If you burn a little less, you're still going to have to sand it. If you burn nothing, well, then you don't sand. Okay, so I'd rather adjust it on the fly and move my way down. Then I know I'm set for the rest of the board. Okay, if that gives you an idea. But typically work on a piece of scrap first. Okay, the motor will be stuck up at the top, and then obviously the cable. So some of them will have batteries in them. For a machine like this, I prefer to have a corded machine, because there's constant voltage that's coming through and constant power. I don't want to be working with something and then suddenly that battery starts depleting on me. They don't wind down. Some of the batteries are intelligent. They'll beep at you, but you know what? We want to get the last mile. And that's where it stops, and then it juts, and then it takes a nick out, and then you've got a problem. So you don't want to. So I like a corded machine. I've got cordless, but I prefer a corded when I'm doing a fairly big, complex job. All right, obviously the two handles that are nice to grab. The trigger is under the handle, so it's on the other side. You pull the trigger, it fires up, and then it's got a little stop button on the side, lock-on switch, that you can lock that button, okay? The only problem is if something happens and you panic, you forget that you've got to click the trigger or the trigger switch to unlock it. Okay, so I prefer not to hit the lock switch. I just normally pull the trigger and then move it. It's a bit tiring, even for me though. It's a bit tiring because if you have to do a fairly big table, and that's maybe if you look at the total meters, it might be 6 or 8 meters. Your fingers will feel. Your finger will feel it. Okay, but it's probably the best way to work. Okay, in my opinion. Right, there's your collet for the different size collets to take the different size bits, and then of course there's the depth stop with the turrets. And then your depth stop is set over here with a little fine micro adjust at the top for up or down. And then, of course, the base. Okay, so that's the basic machine. But this is the type of style that you should aim for first. Don't go and get a trim router. If you can get that first, you don't have to get this, mate. You can go, you know what, everybody knocks the Ryobi, for example. I had a Ryobi that I got, I would not buy it. I'm not saying why I wouldn't buy it, but I wouldn't buy a Ryobi because I think it's the tools that come with it. There's nothing that you can get to build up your arsenal of tools like tracks and stuff like that and jigs that you can put it into, whereas the other manufacturers have concentrated on that. So the Ryobi is just a plain out-of-the-box type of router, but it's value for money. I mean, that router works. I mean, I use it when I have a big job that I've got to do, and I've set everything up. I can have up to 6 or 7 routers on the table. That's not crazy. Yeah, because you set them at different depths for different things. So you just grab the particular router and you work with it. And I ran out of one and I thought, oh, I've got to get another router. I go up to the store and there's this box that I opened. And I thought, yeah, all right, let's give it a bash. I need it. Let's put it in. And you know what? It worked well. Everything was logical, the same as what you've got on these machines. So also the other thing, when you plunge, there's a little plunge lock, but it works this way. The spring locks it. And when you want to plunge, you pull it down, and then you push down, and you let go. Then it locks it. Not like the other routers where it's unlocked, and then you've got to grab it and then lock it when you plunge down. Then it wobbles in the Dado, and then it makes a little bit of a rounded cut into the piece of wood. And that becomes frustrating. So it was amazing. I thought for what everybody condemns and, and has a lot of, well, not condemns, has a lot to say about the Ryobi product. This actually worked quite well. It was intuitive, so I was quite happy with it. So I do every now and again grab it and just give it a bit of a run, and it's happy. Me and the Ryobi are one, not with the universe, but we're okay. In addition, there's other little gadgets that come with all of this, but we'll discuss that later. Right, and then the other one is the router table. So I'm not going to be talking about the router table, but if you are upping your game, the router table is what you would like to also eventually get. But it also comes with its problems as well. When I say problems from a safety point of view, so you really do need to know how to work with that. That can grab your piece of wood that you're working with and pull it out your hand with a flash. You wouldn't even know it's happened. You're still standing and looking and it's gone. That's as quick as that. So you've got to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more cautious on a router table. If you know how to work with it properly, it's a great tool to have in the shop, okay? So not to put you off, but just to let you know, okay? Right, so some router tips and tricks so we can start having a look at what we can do and how we can play, okay? Can anybody recognize what that is? What is it? Yeah, a flattening sled, okay? I don't know who made this one, but okay, they're becoming all the rage. So everybody's purchasing these toys now, and my mate Greg, he's been offered to flatten his table with a sled. So what it's supposed to do is you put your piece of wood down. So normally big-sized, wide-sized pieces of wood that you can't put through a thicknesser or a drum sander or whatever the case may be. You then use the sled with a nice big bit on it, and you then, as you slide it along, you run it up and down to flatten or level the piece of wood. Okay, so there's a specific group of people that would appreciate a toy like that. I have no use for something like that. So there we go. Okay, so other toys. All right, so let's go and have a look at what we can actually do with a router, okay? So the first thing that we'll normally encounter, because when you're starting off with woodworking, I think one of the first things that most of us put together is we make a cutting board or a breadboard or a board of some sort, okay? Because it teaches us a couple of things. It teaches us how to laminate the boards, okay, correctly. It teaches us how to thickness the boards correctly. Also teaches us how to use the right glue, because when you put it in the dishwasher, it becomes a kit form, and then you have to reassemble it again. Don't worry, I've had a couple of those come through the shop. I said, did you put it through the dishwasher? No, it just fell apart. You know it was in the dishwasher. Okay, so yeah, and so I think so don't put it beyond your scope of things to do, because the breadboard is going to teach you a lot of valuable little skills that you can use to put things together. And then one of the things you want to do is obviously put a juice groove in your board, or if it's a braai plankie that you're making, you want to put a juice groove in it, so that needs a router with a bit. And then you obviously want to round over the edge of the board, that needs a router with a bit, because there isn't any other way to do it unless you want to do it by hand or the sand or something, then by all means. But what I want to show you is, here's a board. Notice that it's clamped down, okay? So there's no risk of this thing being bumped or moved or whatever, so you clamp it down. But now you're going to start taking the cut, okay? So what happens is, so what we've got to look at is the orientation of the board. So the long grain is going this way, and then the end grain is obviously on this side, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the cut, and this is what we need to look at. First of all, if you look at that, which way do we travel on the table, on that board to make the cut, you go one way. Which way is it? Counterclockwise. Okay, if I had a hole in that table, which way would I go around? Okay, so there's a simple way to remember this. And some days when I get a little bit overwhelmed with 1,000 things to do and I'm upside down, I'm on top, and whatever the case may be, it gets a little bit overwhelming. Your brain's a little bit full. You've got to try and understand something. And thank goodness I know this quite easily. That's all you have to do with the right hand. The thumb is the edge of the board, and the index finger is the direction of the cutter. Okay? So even if you're on the inside of a board, on the edge of the inside, and then that. So obviously that will result in clockwise on the inside and anti-clockwise on the outside. But just use this method. And like somebody was saying, what if I'm left-handed? Then use your right hand. Use this method, okay? All right. So help yourself out, okay? Because there is a valid reason for that, and I'll explain it to you. So there's the end grain. Now, the guys that have routed end grain, I think you know it's not the easiest thing to route. It always comes out looking a bit scrappy, tears out and chip outs and stuff like that on the end grain. But there's a solution to get that sorted, and I'll explain it to you now. What I want to do is I just want to orientate you. When you guys have ever done this and you've gone on the end grain and you've exited out there, what happened when you did the exit on that corner? What happened there? Chip out. Okay? I remember building a big table, and I mean a big table, and I was doing the edge. That's the last one I do. I'm exiting on the end grain, not thinking. And as I exit, it splinters out a piece of wood. But I don't know, my eye caught that piece as it splintered. And as it traveled, it landed on my table saw. And I thought, hold on. I took the route. I had the route in the one hand. I didn't take my eye off that splinter in case the shop gremlins ran away with it. And I grabbed that splinter, put it in my mouth, stretched the router off, and I glued that piece back. Because if it happened and I couldn't find that splinter, I would have to now glue another piece of wood, find a matching piece of wood and cut it and glue it onto the corner of that and then reshape it again because there's more effort involved. So I think I was just blessed that I could find that little splinter. Okay, well, it wasn't little. It was actually quite a big. And in fact, I had a splinter of a similar size that I threw away yesterday. I should have actually brought it with. But anyway. Okay, so that's what happens. We're exiting. Why is that? Because you've got the end grain and you've got the long grain on the corner. So when you're exiting off the end grain, the cutter knocks that piece of long grain off, and that causes it to splinter. So how do you mitigate? How do you stop that from happening? What do you do? Well, you can. There's another way to do it. You can put a piece of wood or a block of wood on the end of it and then ride past it. Because now you've pressed up against that piece of wood so that when you're coming past, there's nothing to splinter off. You can actually travel onto the other piece of wood. That's an idea, isn't it? But there's an easy idea. All right, so go around the board. Now you'll note that there's a cut taken there, and you'll see there's a cut taken there because that is the exit of the end grain there, and there's the exit of the end grain there. And they call this a climb cut and a climb cut. So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. So on this side, you can see the grain direction. Okay, so the grain direction that way. If we had to exit there, it would pull the splinter off. But what you're going to do is you're going to do what they call a climb cut or a back cut. Okay, now depending on where you are in the world, some people will call it a very dangerous cut, and in other parts of the world they'll say it's a necessary cut, but you need to be cautious when you take that cut. So what it means is that you pull the router back on that piece of wood. So obviously by pulling it back, you're no longer knocking off a splinter. You're actually compressing that wood when you're coming back. All right? So it's not a perfect clean cut, but it'll stop the splintering from taking place. Okay? It's called a climb cut. Now, when you do the climb cut, normally when you're doing something like this, or when you're putting a little round over on your end grain, and you pull the router back and you do the climb cut, your brain says to you, but this is not dangerous. There's nothing going wrong here. Until the day comes along where you've got a straight cutter and you do the climb cut with a straight cutter, and then suddenly the router is going to start pulling on you. And then you're going to start saying, oh, what's going on now? That's the effects of kickback on a router. And you've introduced that by way of the climb cut. So when you make back cuts, you must be aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, okay?
very valid in this case and only on a short little distance, and that's sufficient because you can now come forward and then whatever bit of fibers that are still sticking, remember that you can actually feel it. If you had to feel that versus a forward cut and it's clean and smooth, you'll feel this is a little bit rough and knobbly when you do the climb cut. But when you go with it forward, it's just a little bit, a minute bit that it's got to clean off. Then it's all smooth and clean all the way down. Okay, does that make sense to you? So watch how that works for you. So the climb cut is a dangerous cut, but in a certain situation. It's not dangerous all the time. Just be cautious of it. So don't be over enthusiastic on it. Yeah. Yeah, because you. Okay, so the question is, why does it not tear it out? Why does it not tear the wood out? Because you're pulling the router back, so it's actually hitting the wood. It's not cutting it. So it's smacking the wood, if you want to think of it like that. So it's not actually performing a cut of sorts. It's actually just knocking the wood off, if you want to imagine it like that. And then when you push it forward, then it cuts it off, it shears it off. But coming backwards, it's smacking it on the way back. So you don't take that's what I'm saying, don't take a massive, big, deep cut on a back cut or a climb cut, because that's where it's going to throw you off, because it's trying to cut. Is cutting, and then while it's spinning like that, it's now, because you're putting it back, it's actually hitting the wood. Yes, correct. So that's what's happening, but don't do it on straight cuts. Normally you don't do that. From time to time sometimes I do things, and I do a climb cut just to think I'm tidying up, but then I don't realize that I'm actually causing a problem and that will pull off. So it doesn't go into the wood or anything. It knocks off, but it'll startle you. Okay. That may lead to something a bit more disastrous. Okay, but it's always under control. Okay, whenever I do a climb cut, I go a little bit more white knuckle than I did before. Yeah. Yes. So the question is, when you do the climb cut, you just do a short piece, and then you're going to come around, and then you're going to do the full long piece and exit again. Okay, that will be the safe way to do it. Yes, well, work it out for yourself. I won't, on a 3-meter table, I'm not going to do a little bit there and then walk around and do a little bit there. So I'll do that a little bit, and then normally what I do is I lean over, which is sometimes naughty, but I'm a taller person, so I'll lean over the table, and I'll come down, go around, then I'll walk up to you. Sometimes I also just do a little bit of a climb cut on this corner, because I've had cases where it didn't work out for me, but it's what I do. You don't have to. Go round, and then I'll stop about here, and then I'll go there, round, and then climb cut on that part. So generally I normally would pick it up from about here and climb cut, because to try and get in to do a climb cut is not easy. So put the bearing up against it and then come down and then go back in and climb cut. You're standing properly, whatever happens, you've got control. And then pull the thing forward. Then just tackle that corner. So I normally do it about here, go climb, but then I pull everything forward. Okay, then it's all even. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, there was a question, but I answered it. Okay. All right, so that's the scenario. So please, if you do that, you're okay. No problems. Okay. Look, sometimes I've even done a climb cut and it's pulled the piece of splinter out. Okay. It's just the way of the wood. Depends on what. And I made the comment. I said to you, why have you got a knot on the edge? Why have you got the knot on end grain? Why have you got a knot on the corner? How bad was your planning? Are you that frugal that you want to keep a knot in the way? Knots are more expensive to fix than anything else. Make sure the knot's in the middle of the table so you don't have to knock them, okay, or whatever. For those of you who have used the router and you've gone through a knot, there are cases where I have to do a refurb and I go through and it pulls that knot out for you. And then you stand here and say, oh, why me? It was there for the last guy and it's now fallen out. But you know what it is? It's because the resins have dried up and they've shrunk and that knot's now gone loose and you're it when you picked it up and you walk past with it, okay? So, yeah, you'll learn the lesson. Okay, so would a back cut help in that case? Most definitely, because it's smacking it, keeping it against the wood. It's not pulling it out of the wood. So that would have helped. And then, of course, a little bit of CA glue. Generally, if that knot's a little bit loose, then grab some CA glue, the thin stuff, and pour it in there and just clamp it up. And then when it's dried, now you can take the router and move down with the router. Is that an idea? So those are things to consider. Even if you're busy with routing and whatever, look, the CA glue, even if there's a knot in the middle of the table, you're going to put it through your thicknesser. glue that knot down if you want to keep that knot, if that makes sense to you. Okay. Alrighty. Things to think about, eh? All right, you guys all good with that? Okay, good. Okay, we went back there. Sorry, let's go forward. Okay. Right, so just a tip for you. Sand your wood edges smooth before routing with edge trimming bits, because any bumps or things or whatever's going on your edge is going to telegraph into the edge that you put down there. So, I mean, discerning clients will look down that edge. They see it goes like that. They're going to say, oh, what happened here? No, I was hand sanding. And then, you dipped a little bit too much and a little bit light there. And then, of course, it telegraphs back into the edge. So make sure that you've sanded everything properly before you route. Routing is you've heard me talking about the tables now a number of times. It's the last thing I do. So set your bit up properly on a piece of scrap. So whatever scrap you've trimmed off on your tabletop, you go and set your router up against that to make sure that it's 100% correct, and then you take your cut. You don't want to practice your cut on the final product, okay? Not going to happen. Well, maybe you're luckier than me. Okay, all right, that makes sense. Okay, there's a good tip for you. All right, good. So edge routing, narrow stock. Okay, so just a couple of things to help you out, because I don't know where you stand. You could be a pro woodworker, you could be an absolute amateur, you could be a total beginner. Let's just sort out something for you, just give you some guidance, okay? So we're looking at edge routing on narrow stock. So this is a common thing. You're going to have this happen. You're going to have these long pieces. You're going to say, but how do I balance the router on this little strip of wood, and it's wobbling all over the place and it doesn't look safe, but I need to put a round over on it and whatever. So what the suggestion is that you've got your workbench. Now, guys, a workbench, these workbenches that are here, have a look at the tops and see what they look like. It's called a workbench. It's not called a coffee table or a kitchen table, okay? Workbenches you work on. If you have a look at this carefully, you can see there's a support board, which is the same thickness as the narrow workpiece that you want to work with. Can you see what they've done? They've just screwed it straight into the workbench. Okay? That's what a workbench is for. And if you are that fussed, then go and get yourself the 2-part epoxy, the alkaline 2-part epoxy, mix it up and fill every one of those little holes, and then go and level it and flatten it out, and it looks okay again, all right? If it really bothers you, okay? All right. Put your wood down. Get yourself a nice set square, the one that's got a little thumb wheel that you can move it up and down. Set the width of that piece of wood. Sometimes it might be good. If it's a straight bit, you may want it to hang a little bit over. Measure it on the edge of the table. Put that other piece of wood, the support board. Once you've got the support board down, make sure you clamp them, and then put the screws in just so it holds it. Remember, the screws are going to act as the clamp because they're not going to be in the way now. Take your clamps off, put your piece of wood that you want to do whatever you need to, put the round over on it, bump it up against there, and then come down. What they've done is they've put a support board or a stop board over here. What they should have done is, and I don't know if it's that clear. No, they didn't. They should have made that support board the same height, so that when you exit down there, if it happens to be end grain that you may have, then you don't have any splintering taking place. In this case, it'll be safe because the long grain's running down that way, okay? All right, so things to think about when you're working with it. It's not, you know what, I think sometimes we get lazy. We don't want to do certain things. Just keep on telling yourself, stop being lazy and get it done. And I'll tell you what, you enjoy the game a lot more, okay? Hello. Yeah. Yeah, no, sure, correct. Yes, there's another option. Okay. All right, so the comment that was made is instead of using clamps or screws, you may want to use double-sided tape, which is actually an efficient way of doing it. Or you may want to use hot glue. So if you've got a hot glue gun, just use the hot glue to mount it down. There's the time and place for both of them. Play it out and see which one works successfully for you and the one that you're comfortable with and at ease with, okay? Look, a roll of, just a matter of interest, I bought my roll of double-sided tape, the thick one. I think it was a 50 mil wide. I bought my roll probably about 10 years ago. I think I've used maybe 2 meters out of it. So it'll show you how much you actually are going to use. You will use it. There are days where you need it, but you can work with it. And then I also work with the same thing with hot glue, but not as often as you get used to working things out. It comes as a last resort in some cases, then I'll just pin things down. Okay. All right. It's easy enough to open up. But be careful. Test it on the wood that you're working with, because you don't want to put the hot melt glue on it that when you pull it off, it pulls half the fibers out, and then you sit there with this gap, and then you think, look at this, and you think, what now? So then you put super glue in and put it back down and find out that the super glue doesn't work with this one because it's too acidic. The wood's too acidic. So there's no polymerization taking place. So now what? Now you've got this piece of hole with a bit of super glue in it and whatever. Okay, so yeah, you need to know your wood, eh? Right. Okay, does that help you guys as a hint? Trust me, you'll do this. It's something that happens quite often. Yeah. Was it a good brand? Okay. No, I see what you mean. Okay. So the comment made is just have a look at the double-sided tape that you purchase, as some of them are a little bit prone to deteriorating, or the glue's probably expiring. So just test them out. But a good brand, I used the Seller. No, I got the 3M double-sided tape. And it's as strong as the day as I bought it. Okay, all right. I mean, if I had to put a strip down and sit on the table, if I stand up, the table comes with me. So it's pretty strong. Okay, all right. It's a good ad, though, hey? Right, cut dados using a jig. Okay, so dados are grooves, okay, that we're going to make. So, for example, dado is something, look, it's not something that we do here. We've become accustomed to using screws and fasteners to screw boards into the sides and to make our shelves. I want to make a comment before we move on. Metal and wood are not good mates, okay? Never have been. If you've got a beautiful oak table and you fasten it with metal fasteners, screws in it, over time, it's going to oxidize and make a black mark on the oak, and that black mark won't come out, okay? Don't come and give me your grandmother's muti. It doesn't work. That black mark stays there. There is a way of removing it, but it's a chemical method, okay? So even if on a chair, if you're using screws to make a chair, remember every time that chair moves, the metal is obviously harder than the wood. So what it's going to do is it starts compressing the fibers around it, and then it gets loose, and then the chair eventually collapses. And then you've got to try and make another plan. That's why when we put wood together, we use wood with wood and glue. So think of a dowel, think of a biscuit, think of a domino. Those are wood fasteners that are used with glue to attach to wood, and they work successfully. So when you look at your chair doesn't have a screw in it, okay? It has a wood fixture. So again, definitely not a biscuit, but it'll have dowels or it might have dominoes in there, okay? But they are wood objects that are glued into wood, and they love each other. They keep each other company, and they don't fall apart. They are such a marriage that they never want to part, okay? Unless you come with brute force and make it happen, okay? Right, so in this case, on the cabinets, we don't do this because we just shove screws in on the side, and then we put our books and that on top of it, and then the next minute the weight has sheared the screws through the screws on the board, and it lies on the floor, and it collapses, and it looks rubbish, and whatever the case may be. The proper way to do it is to take a board and to cut a groove in the board and semi-recess the board into that with a fastener of sorts. So you can, again, either glue the boards directly in. You don't want to put screws in on the outside. You either want to, again, use, in this case, you could use a biscuit and get away with it, or again, dowels or dominoes. Okay, that will work for you. That's a proper cabinet. So if you think of it in terms of woodworking, if you're a proper woodworker, proper cabinet maker, if you want to be one, there shouldn't be any screws in your shop anywhere. Okay, and when you make a piece of furniture, there shouldn't be screws in your furniture anywhere. So think about what I'm saying to you. Now you're going to come along and say to me, yeah, but what about the pocket hole? Everybody's selling the pocket hole jig, for screws. Yeah, look, they've got their time and place. So Mrs. Smith phones me. If you have a look at that cabinet behind you with all those books, and she says to me, my shelf has collapsed from the weight of the books because it's chipboard. So the shelf has collapsed, it's broken. Can I please fix it? So I get there and I find out, heck, man, this thing's been put in with screws, and there's a whole lot of other shelves next to it. How the heck am I going to get that thing out of there? So what do? I go to the far corner, put my little pocket hole jig up there, drill the pocket hole at an angle, put it in there, screw the thing in, I say to it, done, and I walk away. That's perfect. It's not going to hurt and harm anybody. I've fixed the problem. But would I make something like that? No. Using pocket holes? No. I wouldn't do that. I don't use pocket holes. It's just, I've got the kit and everything, so I use it to solve other people's problems, not mine. Just no need for it. And yet, though, funny enough, the guys that do the training here, remember for the cabinet, you had to use pocket holes for the cabinet. But we had a valid reason for that. The pocket holes act as a clamp to clamp the wood. You could actually, when you got back home and that dried by that's following Sunday, you could have actually taken all those pocket hole screws out and that cabinet would have stood on its own because it was glued together. The pocket holes act as clamps. If all the clamps that we had to use would have cost in the region of about 20,000 rands worth of clamps for those 4 cabinets that we were going to build. It's not worth the investment. The screws did the job. So screws act as a clamp. Okay, bear that in mind. All right, so we're going to put these grooves in because we want to do a proper bookshelf or cabinet build. So what they're suggesting that you do in this case is you create for yourself a T-jig. Now, this is not coming up all that clear on the screen here, and I'm a bit concerned about it. But what you would do is you would make yourself something like a T-square, okay? And the T-square will bump up against the edge of the table, and then you'll have so that will be the short part of the T with a piece that goes over the top of it that stands up. And you'll put that across the table. And then what you'll do is, and you do this with a piece of scrap initially, then you'll take you'll clamp it down and then take your router and you'll route into the T. And when you route into that T, it makes a groove for you. So that's the spot where the dado should come into play. Now you can take this T and so before you start, you take your board and you mark where you want the dados to be made. You make a pencil mark. So for example, the top of the dado. You take the T, because it's got its groove cut already from where you made it against the fence or the long part over the board. You then line it up with the pencil mark, and as you line it up, you can now put your router on it, you can run it across and then make the groove. So that's your jig that you could use to make that, for example. So we're just trying to show you how to make a simple jig that you can reuse over and over. It may not just be for this process. That could be used for any other process. You may be wanting to make a box and put a divider in it. You can use it to do that. So there's a number of places where that could be deployed or used for you. Okay, so something to consider in terms of this. So making a simple dado. Dados don't have to be on a shelf either. Like I say, making a box with a divider, that would be sufficient enough, and that's called a dado, okay? And you could use that, for example, all right? So if you have a look at this one, there they're showing it to you. Now, I mean, it's not all that clear. Gosh. If you have a look down here, I hope you can see this. There's the T of the jig, okay? There's the T, the bottom piece, bumps up against the piece of wood, and there's the wood to put the dado. Your original groove that you made, you can see there's a pencil mark on this board here. There's a pencil mark. So the dado, the groove that you originally cut into your jig, lines up with that, because when you bump it up against the edge, which is acting as a fence for your router to go through, it'll cut that dado exactly where you want it. That's the idea that you should be picking up from here. So you may not do this ever in your life, but I hope it stimulates you into thinking about doing something similar for another job that you may want to work or project you want to work on, okay? All right, so there's not always a best fit for everybody. It's just ideas to get you thinking, okay? All right, so again, on this particular hint, use a straight bit with a diameter the same as the board thickness to receive the dado, and this will make sure that you have a tight, snug fitting shelf, okay? So whatever caused the reason in this country for us not doing that in our builds, because if you look at that cabinet straight behind you, it's a good point in case. There's no dados in that. You can see the shelves are suspended, and I suspect they're either done with dowels or they're done with screws, one of the two. So that's just because they're using melamine, okay, and that's how they put cabinets together. That's not a decent cabinet by any means. That's going to last a certain period of time, and then it'll fall apart. But if you had to take the effort and you're building a proper wood cabinet, then do it the proper way. And that's the way to do it, is create the dado and fit the board into there, okay? All right. The suggestion that they're making is an interesting one. If your board is 3/4 inch, which is 19 millimeter, then get a 19 millimeter cutter and make the groove 19 millimeters so that the board will slot in there, okay? If that doesn't make sense to you. The same is if you've got a 1/2 inch, which is 12 millimeter, and you're using 12 millimeter board. Cut it with a 12 millimeter cutter. Don't go and use an 8 millimeter and then have to move across. And remember, you've got to use this method. Okay, otherwise you're going to do a climb cut on the opposite side and guaranteed the board won't fit. Okay, because you're wobbling all over the place. So a couple of things, you make more work and effort for yourself. That's why they try and standardize. However, the 16 millimeter boards are not a standard. We're the only country that makes a 16 millimeter thick board. And it took years before somebody eventually came out with a 16 millimeter wide cutter. And when the minute they came out, I bought 2 of those cutters because I do from time to time, I do melamine jobs. And then I also want to do the job properly and recess it properly so everything looks nice and neat and tidy, okay? Irrespective of it being melamine, okay? All right, yes. Look, if the cabinet is not too big so that you've got sagging coming into place, there's a website called sagulator.com, and they will tell you can put the material in that you're working with, the material, the thickness of the material, the width of the material, and the material type, and it'll tell you how much it will sag over that distance when you apply 20 kilograms, 40 kilograms, 50. So you must be careful when you do glue things in. The sagulator, remember now you're creating a force that's now pulling the boards, trying to pull the boards apart. You know, it's a matter of time before something fails, okay? It's not forever going to stay like that. You may be lucky and get away with it, but just watch what you're doing. So for fairly short distances, I would say 500 millimeters, you can glue them in. There wouldn't be a problem. Okay, then I would use a dowel or I'd use a biscuit. Yes, as the glue. Yeah, because I've got space to glue, so I might as well glue it up. Yeah, for the most part, yes. I mean, I did a project the other day for a company. I posted it on the group, so maybe the guys can remember it. It's that big black cabinet I did with the artifacts in it, the African artifacts that were in it. That was made out of MDF, 12 millimeter MDF. That was all doweled and glued, the whole lot. So if you're working with MDF, there's no end grain or long grain. You just glue it. It'll stick together. There's no problem there. MDF is actually, in one respect, something quite decent to work with. In other respects, it's rubbish. So it goes both ways. There was another question somewhere? Three, so again, stick to the rule of 3. 3 millimeters and then go. So for example, okay, there's rules. Cutting depths, 3 millimeters. Depth on the wood, 1/3. So if the wood is 19 millimeters, what would be 1/3 of 19? 6 millimeters. So you're going to cut 2 cuts of 3 millimeter. Does it make sense? So you make sure it sits 1/3. Well, how far should you be from the edge? 1/3. How far should you be from the top? 1/3. How deep should you go in? Well, on edges, as deep as you can get in, okay? And as it makes sense, all right? But we work on thirds. So think of thirds in most of the things that you work with. Thirds and 3 millimeter, okay? Does it make sense? Good. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So there we go. So there's the scenario you can play out with. And just interestingly enough, I mean, life is just amazing. How would they have done this in the days of old? I mean, they would have taken a plow plane, a hand plane, and they would have cut that groove. And then they got the boards, and the guys would have hand planed those boards. Not guaranteeing that those boards would be exactly 3/4 of an inch. So when you get them, you've made because you've got a cutter that's 3/4 of an inch. You've made your cut with your hand plane, and now you drop the board in and find out the board doesn't want to fit. Now what do you do? What do you have to flatten that board? They actually made a little tool, which is called a side rabbiting tool or Dado tool. It goes right up against the edge of that groove, and then you run it along like that, and it just takes a little slither off until the gap is wide enough on the Dado for you to drop your board in. And I picked one up this week from a mate of mine who's going overseas. He didn't know what it was. When I saw this thing, I kind of, like, I'm definitely taking it. Oh, wow. I said, no, it's just, it looks like it's a piece of broken steel or something else. You know, I got it. Last night I was busy fixing it, and I put it in Evaporust, so we'll see how it works out today. So there you go. It shows you how they did these things. So what we're doing is just merely a modified modern version of it, okay? Right, now, rabbits or rebates? Rabbits. There's a bit of a pronunciation problem, okay? So it's a rebate for the English-speaking people, and rabbits for people in the other parts of the world. So what is this? This is actually the little groove that you cut on the edge of your board. So if you did make the cabinet exactly like that, and you want to put the backing board in, how would you put the backing board in? How would you do that? Suggestions? Yeah, so you create a rabbet or a rebate, which is into that piece of wood, so about halfway in on the 60 mil, 8 mils in all the way around, and then you take your backing board and cut it so that it fits into that recess, and then you would toe nail it in. When they say toe nail is you're going at an angle into the wood, because you're not going to go out, otherwise it's going to come out on the inside of the cupboard. So that's where you would put a rebate in. Other options are You can take your table saw and cut a groove down because the thickness of your blade is 3.2, thickness of the backing board is 3.2. It's got a groove and you can actually drop it in and slot it in, which is actually a nice way because now you don't have to nail anything in place. And then the third option is the South African way is cut it to size and then just nail it, China. Okay. And then when you put your books on, you want to know why the backing board's coming loose. Is that right? Oh, you guys are getting clever. Eh? All right. Now you know how it works. Okay. Don't tell me you're guilty of this. Eh? All right. Rabbet cutting. Let me just talk about this quickly. Have a look at this bit. Can you see this bit has got a number of bearings that you can get with it? Okay. And these bearings, pilot bearings, would cater for the different depths, for the thicknesses of wood that you've got. So you would have something, for example, I'm going to talk in imperial now, so that I'm just showing off, okay? So you would get 1/16, no, not 1/16, that's too small. You probably get 1/8, 1/4, an eighth, 1/4, 60, what's it, 32s, or whatever the case is. So different diameters for the thicknesses of wood. So it hits the side, and the cutter only sticks out that distance. So actually the bearing is going to determine how deep you go into the side of the wood. If you ever come across a bearing kit, like a cutter kit like that, it's worth its weight in gold because not only will you get a rebate bit or a rabbet bit cutter, you'll also get other cutters that you can work with. You just have to change the bearing to get the different depths that you want to work with, if that makes sense to you. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's worth the investment because if you didn't, you would have to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cutters for the different depths that you're working with. Does that make sense to you? And at an average of 300 Rand per cutter, work it out. And that set might put you back, about 700-800 Rand. Okay? Hello. Yeah, okay, so for plunging you can't do much. That's just the length of the cutter. Yeah, this will be on the natural, so in other words on the edges, basically on edges, yeah. Yes, okay, so and then move the jig the way you need it, yeah. So different ways of doing it. You got to work out what is the most efficient way for you to work. You know, if you're just a weekend warrior, yeah, then take your time. You know, spend 20 minutes lining stuff up. You know, if you're making money out of it, time is money. Your workflow's got to push. Somebody else had a question. You can. It's a good idea to use that, but remember now, how big is this cabinet? If it's as long as that, it's 2 meters. Can you push a 2 meter length through a router table? Yeah, if you can, by all means, if that's part of your work. But you don't want to set it up for 2 meters of a cut when the average 500 millimeters is what you work with. You understand? So in that case, a router would do the job efficiently. So you got to always, this is the thing, in woodworking, there's always more than one way to solve the problem. The question is, what is the most efficient? Okay, and you've got to understand where you're standing, okay? Remember, when you look at a piece of furniture, you never really know what the heck's going on inside, eh? The guys that have done dovetails, your dovetails look beautiful on the outside, eh? I'd love to know what the heck's going on behind. Oh, that's what gets my interest, okay? We can all make them look good on the outside, but what's going on the inside is the question. What about a mortise and tenon? Proper hidden, eh? You never know what's going on in there. Properly hidden. Only you know what you've done. You understand? So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in it, but yeah, always consider it. What works best for you. Okay. All right. Any other question? Anybody else? Okay, good. All right, so there's your rebate cutting. So you can see the other guy's got the fixed base on it and set it to the depth and then run the cut, okay, and make the cut. All right, so there's your dado already done, and then you route. So the guy's standing on that side for the photo, okay? Which way is he going to be going with the router? That way, okay? And you can do that. I mean, if you want to stand there and pull the router down, that's up to you. Or if you want to stand here and push the router, it's entirely up to you how you want to do it. Just follow the correct direction, that's all, okay? Take your pick and then you run with it from there. Right, anyone? Anybody? Okay. All right, so router's a bit savvy. Okay, so router bits come in 2 types, okay? You get a carbide tipped and then you get a high-speed steel, okay? So which one should you go for? Well, the thing is, you're making an investment. You can go cheap and nasty, and that's what you're going to get. Or you go the expensive route, and you get longevity out of the router bit, okay? In my case, I can't afford a router bit to fail on me when I'm going through a job and I've got to get things done. I need things to work for me, and I will be the judge of whether they're cutting properly or not. So if I've got a good quality cutter and it's not working for me, it gives me the opportunity to go and get another cutter, okay? So I want to be in that position. I don't want to go and buy cheap. Goedkoop is diekoop. We know this one. So let's just go through it. Now, I remember a while back, a mate of ours in the south, he got a container of router bits, and they came in. And he phoned around, he phoned me, and he phoned Morris and a couple of other guys. He said, please, I've got these router bits. You guys want to come and grab them? So went to him and I said to him, well, Jeff, how much are these things? He said, well, you grab them, $10 a piece. I mean, there's the router bit, for 10 Rand. I mean, this is steal. But then when we got there and had a look at it, all the boxes, the labels had come off. So probably from traveling in the container with the moisture and heat and humidity and whatever, the label and the glue that they obviously used wasn't of a good quality. The labels fell off. So for him to go and get labor to try and work out what each bit was and then relabel it was more expensive. So it was easier for him just to dump the stuff for 10 Rand a bit, cover his costs and go. So that's a router bit. I want to send it around. I bought a lot of them. So that one is a straight cutter. Let me send you a Roman OG. Don't think of it as a Roman OG, but as a Roman OG. So these ones, if you have a look at it, there's no real shine on them for high-speed steel. And you'll see they sintered to the material. The two materials are different. So the actual router versus the cutting bit are different pieces, and they can also be the same piece of material throughout. So that's the one side. Then on a carbide tipped is sharp, and it's shiny, and it's sintered, it's brazed on, so you will never get it made out of a solid piece. Gosh, they would cost a fortune if you could get them like that. So they normally welded or sintered. Not sintered, brazed onto the router piece. So they're normally shiny, and the other way that you'll know it is that if you make a cut or something like it, you'll know that they always tend to stay sharp. The one that I'm sending out to you now, that is a high-speed steel. That blunts within about a couple of meters when it's done. You can throw it away. So that's really not worth the money at all. Maybe worth collecting the bearing, but I've even had the bearing disintegrate completely on me. So you know what you're buying, okay? So that's the way you would tell the difference. And the other advantage is that you can actually take your carbide tipped and the resins and stuff that get stuck to it. If you get yourself a little diamond card with the different grits on it, you get those little credit card diamond sharpening things. The guys use it for knives and so on. Get one of those, dip it into a solution to clear the resins and stuff off it, and you can use that just to give it a little bit of a lick and a sharpen, okay, and it'll work for you. The high-speed steels are definitely not worth the effort. They certainly not worth the effort. Okay, now these are a bit tricky. These, I would say, are carbide. They're not the highest quality carbide. So there's a straight cutter. And then another thing with carbide, if you put carbide loose in a box and they all knock and tap each other, they chip. And if you drop them, they chip. So you always want to work over your table when you're working with these things, okay? All right. Okay, it's a very sore topic and point. We don't have good quality router bits in this country. We really don't. Because we basically have one brand come in. And then they get rebranded for everybody else. So the Torcraft ones, the ProTech ones, and what other one is? I think there's one more. They all come from the same company. All exactly the same company. So when you go and have a look at the Bosch bits in that cabinet there and you look at the price, you're going to get a bit of a, but you are going to live that long with those router bits. And then if you have a look at the Freud router bits, Freud is a Italiano company owned by Bosch. So if you buy Freud or Bosch, you're buying the same thing. They make good cutters. So if you get the Bosch stuff or you get the Freud stuff, you got good cutters. There's a handful of cutters in the manufacturers in the world, and you've got to kind of pinpoint the brand. I mean, the guys will talk about in the United States, I think White House or something to that effect. They have a really good, reputable brand. And the one or two others, I mean, the other brand is, you have a look at the UJK. They make really good cutters. So UJK, I stand corrected. I was told that Trend, if you've heard of Trend have their own manufacturing facility. So the Trend router bits, and apparently the UJK have got a close relationship. I stand corrected on this. But their router cutters are just the sweetest in the world. You cannot go wrong with them. I mean, I'll give you an idea. I'm busy putting a round over. I've got a corner template. So I put the corner template down to do a round over. I want to do a 50 millimeter radius on a corner. So I clamp the thing down, take my router. Now I've got the big Bosch. Put that router down with the router cutter. Put that thing down and try and make the cut. And as I go around, I think, gee, I don't see. Now I've got my vacuum extractor on, but I see no dust, and this thing is quiet. And I'm cutting, and I think I'm cutting. So I take the cut, and I think, geez, man, did I plunge deep enough? Lift the thing up, serious enough, it made the cut. That is a good cutter. There's no screaming. The router doesn't go into agony. There's nothing. It's so misleading versus the medium routers that let you know you're doing something. You know, there's something going on there. But the big boys are really up. So I'm using the big one more and more now compared to the other ones. I mean, that's my go-to, is that 1300 for many reasons. But I'm hardly using it. I love my big one. And it does the trick. So really happy with that. Yeah. Yes, you can. So just remember to bump the board over, okay, and follow that rule. So your edge or your fence. Just remember to move your fence over to the left, so you're still following that rule. Don't go the other way, so you go up against there, and then you're back cutting, okay. But yes, you can. I mean, I remember times where I had crazy grooves but it was my stupidity. But I got clever over time, thankfully. You know, I would take a 1/4 inch cutter and then have to do, say, for example, a 10 millimeter dado. And then I would have to move it, you know, and that takes time. And then you realize, hang on a minute, get the width for the groove that you're doing. So then you start working. Remember, these things are standards, you know, and thank goodness for standards, because when you do furniture restoration, thank goodness there's a standard. On the edge. So in other words, when you want to do the OG, like the OG that's going around, again, 3 millimeter rule. 3 millimeter rule, yeah. So catch the edge, do a 3 millimeter, and then another 3 millimeter, and you'll thank me because, yeah, so you want to go 3 millimeter, 3 millimeter. So say, for example, the whole cut is about 9 millimeters for that OG. You want to go 3, 3, 2, because the way you're working is you've got burning. And if you take the last 1 millimeter, it doesn't burn. It cleans everything off nicely for you, okay? All right, just remember to do your climb cut north and south, or east and west, whichever way you're facing, if that makes sense. Okay. No, so you've got to really get that right. Now, I'll tell you what, you'll learn this when you get to oak, especially red oak. That stuff burns. You just look at it and it burns. No, it's not as bad as that. Carbide is like rock. So, no, that's why I just get that little diamond card just to give it a lick. The minute it gets a little bit of a nick on it, just lick it back again. So on the flat side, you just sharpen it, okay, so that but you'll get a bit of life out of that bit, okay. Yeah, I often do that. Sometimes I hit something a little bit hard or something, and it takes a nick on it. Shouldn't, but it does. Okay, I knew this question would come up. Okay. All right, so there's the voodoo science, which is vinegar and olive oil and baking powder and stuff like that. Or what is it, Greg? What's the voodoo science? Vinegar and baking soda. Is that the one? Yeah, there's that voodoo science. So I'm a guy who believes in chemicals all the way around. So I tried a couple of products. I don't like using oven cleaner because I think that's going to cause a bit of an issue if it gets into the bearing and stuff like that. I just use, crud cutter. It's made by Rust-Oleum. You can get it at Leroy Merlin. It comes in a gallon jug. And put that into crud cutter. So you could crud, Krud, Kutter, Crud Cutter. And they make a range of products, Rust-Oleum, which was taken over by Rust-Oleum. They've got resin remover, which is actually their sticker remover. You want to call it a decal. You want to remove stickers off something, you can use to take that glue off. Takes the resin off pine just as easy. So it's actually, I've discovered that by mistake. So that works quite well. But yeah, so you get a little jug, if you've got a hand cream thing in container that's emptied, that's a nice size and fit to put your cutters in there. So if the cutters get clogged up, so especially, that's why pine is not a popular product that I work with in my shop. For many reasons. It clogs up my belts. It clogs up the sandpaper. It clogs up the table saw blade. It clogs up the router cutters. It clogs up the miter saw. So pine is, so whenever somebody wants something made out of pine, I kind of, okay, and then, yeah, I've got to do it. Because that resin is there. There's no ways that resin is going to disappear. It's 100 years down the road, that resin's still there. So it's going to say hello to you at some point. So yes, then I take all those tools and I put them in. So even the blades, I use a paint tin, one of those 20-litre paint tin buckets, take the lid, put the blade on that, and then just pull the crud cutter on top of that, and then leave it overnight. The following morning, just pull the... Now, the nice thing about the crud cutter is just take a... listen, if you are a woodworker, you should get yourself one of those at the Chinese stores, those sieves that they sieve for flour and stuff like that in the kitchen, the one that's got the cone version. You can use that to pour your varnish through, so anything that's all the crud or whatever stays behind, and you can use it for your crud cutter, just to pour it through, and the residue stays behind. You got to, okay, it changes the color a little bit, but man, I've got 2 jugs. The one jug is still standing in there. The other jug, I think I've used about half of it, and that's probably over a period of 5 or 6 years now. So that lasts. And just pour it, or don't pour it back into the original jug, just put it into a container, put the crud cutter so you know what it is, okay? But it'll last. So, for example, sanding belts on my drum sander, so when the resin gets built up onto that, undo the belt, and then stick it back into that little jar, fill it up with crud cutter, leave it overnight, take it out the following morning. Most of the crud, the stuff has come off, that gum has come off your belt. Please don't use it on a paper, okay, on a paper sander, on a cloth-backed. Just take it out. You might need to give it a bit of a scrub, and then just rinse it off with some water, hang it up so the thing dries out, put it back on your machine, off you go again. Okay, so there's one if you didn't know. Okay, and the same as your disc sanders, if they got cloth backing, when you take it off those big sanders, take it off, just roll it up, put it into a tube, fill it up with crud cutter, take it out, scrub it off. You don't even have to make an effort to scrub it. You just have to scrubbing it just purely to get the rest of it off, and it falls away. Wash it off, and then re-glue it and stick it back on again, and off you go. It's good. There's nothing else. Nothing happened to the grit. The grit's still fine. So something to consider. Okay, so crud cutter goes a long way in your shop. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So that's the router savvy. So the point is, buy yourself a good cutter. Okay. And then before we move on, I just want to make a comment about cutters. Don't buy a set of cutters. I know you guys have already done that. And I know that if you go back this afternoon and you have a look at it, I guarantee you've not used more than 5 of those cutters. The rest of them are still standing there staring at you. At an average price of 300 Rand a cutter, you haven't done yourself a favor. Buy the cutter you need, not the cutter you want. Okay? All right. Buy the one you need. And that's how it'll work for you. Okay? So that's a bit of good sage advice I can give you. I got the sets. They were given to me or gifted or whatever. They come in handy because, I do a lot of fancy different stuff. So, yes, always nice to know you've got a choice of cutter sizes and stuff like that. But for the average guy, you know what? I think you're going to land up with about 5 or 6 cutters that you can work with. If you go a little bit over that, then you're starting to become a proper, decent cabinet maker. Okay, all right, then things are looking good for you. So if you've got a range of about 10 that you're using, then you're up there. Okay, so you measure your ability by the number of cutters that you use. Okay, I made that up, but it works. Okay. Right, there's the depth of cut. I don't think I need to talk about that. I did mention it. So you take your cut, okay, you can see there, this is oak. You can see the cut, and then just leave yourself a millimeter, and then come and do the last cut. Go over it, and I'll tell you what, you've got it nicely. Has anybody burnt oak with a cutter before? Anybody? How long did you spend sanding? Yeah, all right. Sanding is not the easiest job on burnt oak, I can tell you that. You'll spend more time. It's rather worth it to just maybe put it through the thicknesser to take another millimeter off and then make a cut again. Okay, it might be worth doing that in some cases, all right. That's if you can still do that. Right, but there we go for depth of cut. Otherwise, there's your progression, 3 millimeter, 3 millimeter, 3 millimeter. Or if your router can do 4, some of them are starting to do 4s, okay, because the cutters are good quality now. Even the cheap stuff is good quality on the shaft. It's easy enough to work with. So by all means, but sometimes I go to some of my mates and I look at them and they plunge 6 millimeters straight in and off they go. And I look at this and okay. Now your brain's saying, look, it doesn't happen. I've never seen it happen where the cutter just cracks and breaks and flies off and goes all over the place. That just doesn't happen. The bearing falls off, things will happen, but I've never had a cutter break on me. Okay, well, touch wood. Plenty of that around. Okay, so, but be cautious, so do the thing the right way. Your router will thank you, okay, if anything, if you do the depths properly. All right, good. Okay, so biscuit joinery without a biscuit joint. So I think at that point I'm going to do timeout. For the folks back home, you can go grab a cup of coffee now, and the rest of us, we're going to take a break. 15 minutes, we'll be back at 11 o'clock, and then we'll carry on. Okay. All right, there's coffee there. I don't know if it's going to be enough for everybody, so grab while it's hot. Okay. Start without him. All right, folks, welcome back from your coffee break. I think we kind of went a little bit over there. I lost track of time, but okay. All right, we're all back. Do you have any questions from the... No. Yeah, that's my go-to. Yeah, nice toy. Alrighty. Okay, we're all back. Coffeeed up. Smoked up. We have a question from the audience. Very much open, my mate. Very much. Ah, yes. And then a long time ago, the Bloemfontein one closed. But now we do it online, and we have a store. Oh, no, I'm not related, eh? Yeah, okay. Speak nicely now, hey? Good. Yes. Common sense. Full belt, eh? Bigger the bit, the faster, eh? All right, okay, don't believe me. That's all nonsense. Okay, there was a question about router speed. Sorry, I had to just... I know, I've got to stop it. Okay, somebody's talking about the circumference and centrifugal force and gravity and all sorts of stuff. Folks, okay, it's quite easy. The smaller the diameter of the bit, the faster the speed. The bigger the diameter of the bit, the slower the speed. Okay? So if you're not quite sure, they're normally numbered between 1 and 6. If you've got a small bit in there, when I talk about a small bit, I'm going to say, you know, something that's got a 3 millimeter diameter, 5, 6 millimeter, 7, 8, even to a 10 millimeter diameter, you can probably give it a full belt of 6, the 6 faster speed, okay? But then it's also marrying up between the wood burning, how fast you're moving the router, and the speed of the bit. Okay, so you've got three things that are against you. So then there's nothing constant there, 3 variables. So it's difficult to try and hit a sweet spot on that. So that's why I made the comment. If you're going to route something on a piece of wood on your project, keep the offcuts, don't throw them away. So you can then take that piece of wood and go and practice the cuts that you need to make on it to set your speed. So I don't generally, I've kind of made one thing constant, and that's the speed to a certain degree. I move the router either faster or slower to reduce the burning. But I know that oak, no matter how I do it. So you'll get it perfect on the long runs. And as you go around those corners, there's the burning. And I've now accepted that as fact. So maybe someone out there has got a miracle cure for us. Let us know. But I know that's what I'm down to. But then I get clever. So I just leave the last millimeter. And now that I'm used to it and I'm now okay with everything on the table, I've got my muscle memory in place, then I'll just take the last 1 millimeter and just walk around quickly. And it does most of it. There might just be a little bit of burning I've got to clean off here and there, okay? And there's no miracle cure to put something chemical on it to remove it, because I've tried that, so nothing works, barring taking a bit of sandpaper. But please, don't use a 40 grit to take out the burn, because, and don't use a 320 grit to take it out either, because 320 you'll be there all day, and 40 will hurt it. So kind of about a 120 is where you should land. Okay, sometimes sometimes you keep your sanding discs, maybe the 80 grit that's gone a little bit blunt, that'll be a nice one to clean the burning off. Okay, so I hope that kind of answers the question. Yeah, but generally, but if it's a bigger bit, so when I say a bigger bit, if I'm going to use an OG, so something like this. All right, and this would be about a 25 to a 30 millimeter diameter. So something like that, I would dial it down to about a number 4 on the wheel, okay? Take it out. But sometimes I forget to do that. I just let it go. And then you'll see the burning at the same time. So then you'll realize, okay, you know what, we make our own work, okay? We keep ourselves busy. All righty. All right, yeah. So a blunt bit, you'll certainly know about it, because when you're busy pushing your router, you'll find it's a little bit difficult to remember to let the router do the work. You shouldn't be pushing things around. The router, you're basically teasing it along. If you can imagine yourself blowing it along, let the router do the work. But if the router's starting to fight you a little bit, then the bit is going blunt. Yeah, then you might want to take that diamond card, just give it a bit of a lick on the back of it. It may sharpen it up for you, and then off you go. But if you got yourself the cheap bits, just say farewell, or put it on the wall as a memento or memorial or whatever you want to have for your bits, and then take it from there. But yeah, definitely sharpness is a big factor. You'll feel the difference, okay? And you'll feel the difference between the different bit manufacturers, so some of them can cut so sweet, eh? Wow, they are just, put them down. You don't even know, they don't even look like they're cutting. And then when you look at it, it's done such a sweet cut. I mean, especially on the edges, it's the most amazing thing ever. So yeah, consider it. Okay, so I hope that answers the question on the speed. Okay, so it's something you need to also work with. Yes, okay. Okay, so, yeah. What's what? Okay, so a little bit earlier I spoke about the collet sizes, okay? So the common collet sizes are 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch is the common collet sizes. But then I'm not going to say thank you to a particular company, but thanks to a particular company, they developed an 8mm bit, okay? Because they wanted to be different, which then drove everybody into the 8mm diameter shaft business. So when I talk about the bit, it's the shank is, so 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch shank. I don't have a 1/2 inch. Oh, here we go. So there's a 1/2 inch shank. Look at the length of that. Okay, so that's well into a 60mm probably long bit. So there's a 1/2 inch shank, and that's a 1/4 inch shank. Okay, so those are the two commons, 6.3 and 12.6 something. Then the 8mm appeared on the scene. So it's a proper 8mm diameter bit, shank. Then what happened is, again, I don't know who did it, but somebody made a 6mm, probably the Europeans in going against the Imperial. They made a 6mm shank, and then they made a 10mm shank, and then they made a 12mm shank. Now, the specialized bits always come in those millimeter, the rounded millimeters. So the 6, the 8, the 10, and the 12. You get these specialized bits, maybe an upcut, downcut, spiral cutter. They will come in at 12mm, for example. And it is annoying because now you have to get the collets, that range of collets, to manage all those bits. So when you purchase bits, and I nearly got caught out, there's a company that sells a particular bit, and I looked at the image thinking, okay, this is a 1/2 inch, and they said 12mm, and I had it in the shopping cart, and when I went through, I thought, hang on a minute, do they do a 1/2 inch and a 12mm? And I went back and had a look again. Yes, they did. So they've got the same cutter, but as a 12mm and a 1/2 inch. And it was look, I could have taken the 12 because I've got the 12 collared, but I want the 1/2 inch. Okay, so I had to just change it to a 1/2 inch. Does that make sense? So what they do nowadays, what happens is the average or the mid-range routers come out with a 1/4 inch, and they come out with an 8mm collet. Although the 8mm router or shank router bits are not that common. They're out there, but they're not that common. It's the 1/4 inch and the 1/2 inch that rules the world. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about going metric on that level. I'm quite happy that they keep it like that. I mean, it doesn't hurt me at all because the profiles and everything are exactly the same. So now they're not going to give you a 6mm cutter. They're going to give you a 6.3mm cutter on the 6mm shank. Costs more, and by the way, they're more expensive for the 6mm, 8mm, 10, and 12 because they have to cut the shaft down. And if it's a solid carbide, you've got to pay for that. I'd rather just stick with the 1/2 inch and the 1/4 inch. Okay, does that make sense to you? Yes, my mate. Okay, you must use the shank to match the collet. So if you've got a 6mm shank, 6mm collet. If you've got a 6mm shank, you can't put it in a 1/4 inch collet because there's a little bit of a gap and you're going to have it go loose and it'll hurt you, because what will happen, it'll either start slipping out when it cuts or it might move up. So there's going to be some movement, it's not gripping it properly, and you're going to over tighten the collet, which means you're going to damage the collet. That's why you don't leave, practice what you preach. Don't leave a bit in your router when you're finished, okay? I'm guilty of that, so I can't preach to you because my little trim router has the bit permanently in there, and I don't put anything else in there. So, all right, but for everything else, I take it out because it stresses the metal. And then, and there's, some guys will tell you that depending on how many hours you use your router, you should replace the collet irrespective because there's stress on the collet, there's metal fatigue. So you should be replacing it. Okay, I use it, I take it out, pack it away. But I leave the collet in, obviously. But I don't leave a bit in the collet, okay, and tightened up. All right. And then the other question that came out of the woodwork was, how tight do you make the collet on the shank? Well, tighten it, give it a good tight nip. So, and also tighten it so that you are able to undo it. I've not heard of people, I don't know if anybody's over tightened it, that they've stripped it or broken it or whatever the case may be. So just give it a good tighten up, okay? You got the little collet lock, and then you got your wrench that you'll tighten it up. Do it like that, okay? Yeah. Okay, good question. Okay, so there's two schools of thought. One that says no go, and that's me, and then the other school says, use it. The big brands sell the reducing collet. So it's a reducing collet. In other words, it's an insert. So you've got an 8mm diameter, and you put a reducing collet to take it down to a 1/4 inch, or to a 6mm, for example. It's risky because it's a little split in the collet, or that little reducer, and that's got to now grip whatever you've got. If it's not 100% clean or whatever, it's going to cause an issue. But always inspect your bits. If you look at the shank of your bit, if it's got little scouring marks on it, then you're not putting it in tightly, or you've got the wrong size collet. So if anything like that happens, it's got little burrs on it, then I would basically say not worth putting into my router. So it's also, that's why, take it out, and that's why I said to you a little bit earlier on, always inspect your things and tighten them up and then pack them away. Clean them up, and you know what the condition of them are. None of mine basically all look like this one does. It's clean. There's no marks or anything on it. So always look. That'll be the telltale that there's something going wrong. Okay, but you want to just keep an eye on that. Okay. I've had disasters, but nothing that's been a major disaster, if you want to call it that. And for the most part, I think these bits, we use them on the training, and they're pretty good. You looked at them as they went around. There was no major scouring or anything on them. They were all good. And if they are slipping, then obviously there's something wrong with the collet, or you're not tightening it up properly, okay? Always clean the collets and always clean the shanks. Wipe them down, because dust in that can accumulate and build up over time and stop it from closing and clamping properly, okay? But play it by ear. If things don't look right, then you game over. You've got to do something. Go either get a replacement collet, they're not expensive, but they're worth, and they're safe enough. I would rather get a new one. I've never had to buy a new collet, I must be honest, in all the years that I've been working. So they all seem to function well. Anybody else? Any other one? Okay, cool. Okay, I think that covered mostly what we need to know. All right, good. Let's have a look at the next one. Okay, so we're going to talk quickly about just some little tricks that you can do with your router, because your router becomes quite a multi-purpose handy tool for you in the shop. So what you want to have a look at, Joe, is the first one is the biscuit jointed. Do you know what a biscuit is in woodworking? It's not those things you bake in an oven and feed us men after we've worked hard to make a little project for you. So a biscuit is a little oval object made out of wood. It's compressed wood. And what you do is it's used for joinery, okay, to join wood together. It can also be used for lining if you're going to make a big, long tabletop and the wood sags or whatever the case, when you're trying to line them up to try and minimize the amount of little raised bit. You want to try and get as level as possible. Then you can cut biscuit slots, put a biscuit in between the two boards, marry it up, and it should keep the board fairly flat and level over its length for you to work with. Used for furniture design, not for chairs, tables you could get away with, shelves and the likes. Okay, so quite a useful tool. I have a biscuit cutter. It's cheaper than using a domino, and in some cases cheaper than using a dowel, and it's also more accurate. Okay, so it's a nice toy. I like it. Now, if you don't have the money for one, you can use your router as a biscuit jointer, because you get yourself a biscuit cutter. Okay, so there it is. So you get a biscuit cutter. There's the cutter itself. It's just it's about 3.2 or 3.8 millimeter thick, and then you can do the cutting on it. Now, if you've got the bearing kit, like I spoke about a bit earlier, you can put it'll be 3 different bearings. Well, there's actually more. The biscuits come in different sizes. So there's a 0 or a 0, which is a small biscuit. Then there's a number 10, which is a little bit bigger, and then a number 20. It's probably the one that you guys are more familiar with. It's the bigger type of biscuit. But then there's also the D and the F and another size, if I remember. So there's in all, it's probably about 7 different sizes of biscuits that you can get. But the more common one is the 0, 10, and the 20. Now, the 0 would be used, for example, on maybe 9 millimeter thick board to try and join those together, because you make a slot in the board, it's not going to cut through. And then the 20 would be for 16 millimeter thick board and up. Okay, so you can join the boards together and work with it and whatever. But if you got yourself, like we saw with the rebate bit, with those bearings, then you would use the different bearings to give you the different depth of the cutter for the 0, 10, and the 20. So then you would have the slot cutter that you can then put into the edge of your board. Okay, so you can make little slots, and you pop the biscuits in, bring the other board together. So basically it would be the biscuit slots inside there, and then you would join those 2 pieces together, and then it'll be flat for you. Minimal work for you to do on the top, on the surface, okay? And it'll join it up. Does it give it any additional strength? No. It's only for alignment on the slots. The strength is going to come from the glue on the edges anyway. For the most part, I mean, someone was at my shop this week, and I just finished laminating a table top, and they said to me, "Oh, what did you use in between?" I said, "Nothing." "Oh, but don't you use biscuits or dowels or dominoes or something?" "No, nothing. If I don't have to put something in there, I'm not going to put anything in there." The 2 parts of laminate. How do you think they did it in the days gone by? There was no such thing as creating fancy little connectors and stuff like that. Then companies, once it became mechanized, they would create like a tongue and groove. And that was just to make the job easy for putting the stuff together, because it was a mass production. You know, it's a bit fiddly when you're trying to do them over a 3 meter length without anything inside it. You know, you've got to kind of knock the one side up and another side down, and then, you know, tease it as you go along. If you've got the time to do it, you can do that. But in a manufacturing environment, they would put a tongue and groove, and the 2 parts would come together, and they would be perfectly flat. Makes sense. Why not do that? Because you're in a manufacturing environment. But the biscuits would do the same thing for you. So this is how you would be able to play and work with it in the biscuit cutter option. The only thing that you can't do is you can't put the biscuits on edge. So in other words, if you wanted to, you can put the biscuits on edge, but you can't put it on top of the surface. You can't turn the router. It won't reach the surface to make a slot. So you couldn't actually do something like that. You couldn't do a T-joint. But you can pretty much do these kind of joints. So if you want to do your breadboards and the wood's curving and going a bit crazy on you, put a couple of biscuits, like about between 100 and 150 millimeters apart. Put the biscuits all the way down, create the slots. Just remember to mark it and make the slots on the opposing sides, okay? And then you marry the 2 parts together, and then you clamp it up, and there you go. You got your boards, and they're nice and flat, okay? All right, so that's something that you could work with. So you don't have to run out and get a biscuit cutter, okay? So the router will do the trick for you. I know it's nothing fantastic, but it's an idea. Yes? Yeah, you can. Yeah, sure, you can. You can use the 3 millimeter cutter or the 3.2 mil cutter. You could do that. Or, yeah. So you decide how you want to manage it. So there are solutions, okay? Sorry, someone else? Okay. All right, so there's the biscuit joinery without a biscuit jointer. So there you can see. So, yeah, look, there are times where I would actually do this. I'll knock it inside, just on the inside of the length of board, and then go down, and then now you don't have to worry about marking the opposite edges. You just put 2 grooves in on the opposite faces, and then you put your biscuits in, and then you close it up. Do a dry fit, please, folks. The day you don't do the dry fit is the day it doesn't work. Something doesn't work. So then you put the 2 pieces together. Now you just glue it up. And the other thing is the biscuits are used not for strength purposes. I've just discussed that with you. If you're gluing up the biscuit, there's a little bit of a problem that you're going to confront yourself with. So what happens is if you butter the biscuit, so that means glue up the whole biscuit and then stick it in there. Remember, the groove's got moisture, and that moisture's got to go somewhere. So what typically happens is when you pull the two boards together, it all looks nice. But the moisture overnight will expand the wood. And what it does is it creates little bumps on the wood, which you don't pick up. And then you come along with your sander because there might just be a ever so slight ridge, about a 0.2 of a millimeter ridge, and you want to flatten that. You either take out your cabinet scraper, if you're that way inclined, or you take your sander and you smooth it all down. What you don't realize is those little bumps, you're smoothing them down. And then when you've finished making your table, you put your varnish on it and you send it off to your client. And then, of course, we go through the typical high-felt winter where it's bone dry. And then, around about September, your client phones you to say to you, we spilled some water on the table. Easy job to fix. But, and then there's the but, and you say, oh, you've got little puddles of water lying down the length of the table. And then it suddenly dawns upon you what happened. That the water's now evaporated and the wood has gone back to its natural state and dried out. And now where it's dried, it's actually made these little compressions all the way down because there's no glue or moisture in there anymore. So please be careful. That's why you don't butter or glue the biscuits. You just stick them in. The edges will glue the thing together. Does that make sense to you? Are you listening? All right, so don't be a euro overnight and then a disaster in a month's time. Okay? Just do the thing the right way. Don't stop wasting time. So that's what's going to happen there. So normally what happens with me when I do this is I'll route the slot and I'll exit on the other side. I'm the absolute hero, eh? So now I've got this groove. Now I've got to fix that up. Okay, so it doesn't matter because I've got to shorten the board. I still got that groove. So then invariably what would I do? What would be a solution? Guys, did you hear that answer? Seriously. I'm going to just ignore you for a minute there. So then what I do is I then just decide to exit on all of them, okay, because now game over. And then all you do is you get a nice piece of dark wood and you plug it on that end. Or, you know, the backing board, because the cut is 3.2, the backing board is 3.2. Are you listening? And it's got that nice dark look. And you plug it in. And when the client says, so no, that's, I thought it would make a nice feature for you. It looks a little bit different. Oh, yeah, it does. It looks actually quite nice. Yeah? And there you go. So you just plug it up. Then what you do is you don't use biscuits. Maybe just cut one long strip, and then you stick that strip in and marry the two parts together. So that little strip will also help to level it up for you. Okay. Then you don't have to use the biscuits at a cost of, 43 cents a biscuit. So that off-cut of board that you had, cut a strip out and just stick it in there, and the job's done. Does that make sense to you? It's a feature. It's like software, hey? It's not a bug, it's a feature. Okay, it's not a mistake, it's a feature. What do you mean it's a mistake? I thought you'd like it. Well, yeah, no, it's not what I asked for, but yeah, you're right, it does look nice. Okay, good. Contrasting wood, you tell me that contrasting wood doesn't look good. Come on. Eh? Even if it's pine, with a bit of dark wood in there. Oh, gosh. Or you get like me, I wish I'd taken a photo. This week I went through with a biscuit cutter. I had to do a melamine cupboard. Again, the guys in the groups would have seen it. I had those little vanity cupboards I had to make. I don't know what happened to my cutter. I think the cutter went to D, which is the deepest depth or the biggest biscuit. It actually cut through. And I looked and I thought, oh, come on, man. This is just a crappy job that I've got to put together. And it's gone through. Anyway, so I put some filler in. Now, you know that light fill that alkaline have? Have a look at that light fill. It's a very light sort of filler. Dries quickly and it doesn't slump and it doesn't squeeze out or anything like that. So I filled it up with light fill. And then the following morning, just took my chisel and chiseled it flat, smoothed it down, took the whiteboard marker, marked over it because it was a grey melamine, and just rubbed it. And I tell you what, it looked perfect. So the client came and fetched it, and off it goes. Lessons learned. You're the only one who does a mistake, and you're the only one who'll know that you've done that mistake. Your client never will. It's like an actor on stage, eh? If they say their lines incorrectly, unless you know the theatre that's being presented, you won't know the mistake. Only they will know it. Okay, so Remember, you're always acting in this game. Okay, so there we go. That's the biscuit joiner. So look, not only for that, but there's other reasons why you may want to apply that slot. Okay, so maybe on the side of a board to put a backing piece in or something like that, or maybe you're building little cabinets with like little pigeonholes or something like that. Then this is where this comes handy for you to work with. Okay, so things like that. So always think of something that you can play out. Your router is an excellent little toy. Okay, cut the slots for the biscuits with a slot cutter, with a pilot bearing, and then make a continuous slot. Just don't exit, okay, like you said. I always do. I make the first one proper, and then I go out on the other end and I exit, and I think, oh God, I did it again. And now I keep saying to myself, I must put stop blocks on either end. Just don't. Start, off you go. And you stand there, you look at it, and you say, oh, come on, you're kidding. Anyway. Okay, I think that speaks for itself. Right, okay, so now I want to tell you something, a little something, dark science of a router. A couple of weeks ago, a guy comes in, he says, he's looking for a router that he can tilt because he wants to cut at an angle. I'm thinking, what is this guy trying to do? So they're building furniture, but they want to make it at an angle. And I'm thinking, but why are you not using a table saw for that job? Why do you want to use a router? Because remember, a router's got a face that goes flat down onto the whatever you're routing, and then it's got a shaft that comes out of there, which is a perfect 90 degrees. It's just, how do you tilt this thing? Okay, unless you put a wedge in there, you can tilt it and run it along, maybe. But it's not built for that. It's built for perfect 90 degree. That's what it does. So in this case, if you want to do a straight edge on a board, okay, now, when you laminate the boards together, you've either got to have a planer, which the Americans call a jointer, okay? So that's the machine that you stand on edge and you push your piece of wood through on edge, okay? And it makes a perfect, straight, flat, 90 degrees with the face. So first you've got to put it through the thicknesser. No, the planer. Do it flat to get a flat face, then put it up against the fence to get that. So you get a perfect 90 degree in that corner, which then enables you to do it with the other boards so you can then bring them together and then you can laminate them, okay? But it doesn't work because the fence might not be perfectly 90 degrees. So there might be an angle on that. So that means you've got to plane that, rotate, plane that, which is not the right thing to do, so that whatever little angles there are, they offset so you can then try and joint them. This is not going to work. It's a mission, okay? And I think the guys that are sitting here will understand this. So that's not a solution. Or you go to the table saw and try and get the table saw blade 100% at 90 degrees. And you're going to push the wood through to cut that. It's not going to be 90 degrees. It's going to be off by a slight bit of a degree, 0.1 of a degree. It's enough to create that gap that you don't need. So then you've got to cut the board, flip it, cut the board, so that the V's are all like that, and then you marry the whole lot together. It gets complicated. The only tool that cuts 100% at 90 degrees is the router. So if you've got long lengths of wood, 4 meters in length, how are you going to get it through that jointer planer? Who's going to help you with that? It's only about 1.2 meters or 3 meters long. Oh, sorry, not 3 meters. At longest, 2 meters. Who's going to help you push it that end to hold it down this side so that it can go out that end and it's 100% flat? Because when you bump those pieces together, there's a little gap in there, and you say, what? And that's going to spoil the whole thing. Do it with a table saw. Who's on the other side to receive it? So yes, you've got an outfeed table. That may work, but one little wobble off the fence and you're back to where you were. So the best way to do this is actually with a router, but with a pilot bearing or a bearing at the top. And what you do is you create yourself create an edge, and you put the edge as close as possible to that edge that you want to trim. You get the idea. So we're looking at about a 2 or 3 millimeter, so that the bearing, and remember it's a straight edge that you're going to be using. So if you go to one of the building suppliers, you get those aluminium straight edges. That's the ones that you need to get. They come in a 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, up to 6 meters in length, depending on what you're doing. So you put that, clamp it down, and then you run that bearing against that, and it'll cut that edge for you 100% 90 degrees and straight. And you can laminate your board together. So now you don't have to go and get yourself a jointer or a planer, if that makes sense to you, okay? You can now do that. So even if you 1 meter boards, you can make them perfectly straight, perfectly square, and knock those two pieces, put the glue in and put those two pieces together. Don't even have to worry about them, and put a slot in it for your biscuits. Don't exit. Put your biscuits in, and then you've got yourself a little tabletop out of your router. You didn't have to go and spend money, 50,000 Rand for a thicknesser and another 30,000 Rand for a planer just to get the same solution as what you can get out of your router. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So bear that in mind, okay, and consider that. Do I do that? No. But that's what you're going to do. What I do is a dark secret, okay. I send it off to the fairies in my shop, and they do it overnight. Now imagine in the earlier days, the guy, when we didn't have the machinery, the guys used to do that with hand planes. And look at those tables today. You can't, I mean, those joints are tight. Proper tight, eh? And they did that by hand. So guys like us will deliberately actually, once we've made the cut, we'll actually put a little bow in it so we can bow the two parts together. And that doesn't ever come apart. So different ways of working. So over that length, after cutting it, we'll still take the hand plane and lick out a bit in the middle and pull those two pieces together. So under compression, and those things stay together. They don't go anywhere. They're married for life, forever and ever. So you've got a tool in your hand that can do some amazing stuff for you. Eh? All right. There we go. So if you have a look at the top board, is the guide. So they're using a piece of wood that was cut straight. You can use that as well. And there's the thick piece underneath it. Can you see that? So let's say that's 25 and let's call that 40. So then he's got there's the router with the bearing. The bearing runs against this top piece of wood to cut that. But now it's not going all the way through down to the bottom. So what do? To get it all the way down? Do you flip the board around and then put it against the edge? What do? Take the guide off, and then you use the fresh cut that you've just made, or the first cut, as your guide for the second part. So a lady comes to me, she asks me to make a calyx. Do you know what a calyx is? So a calyx, it's an IKEA piece of furniture. I often get this. I say, I can do it for you, but not for €99. She says, doesn't matter. Can you just make me this calyx? It's a box that you can put interchangeable. You can put a drawer in, or you can put a wine rack in, or you can leave it open, or you can put whatever, different things you can fit inside it. Quite a clever idea. So in that case, I had to make the top for her. She wants the top, in this case, specifically 40. No, it wasn't 40. It was 42 millimeters thick. So it was 21 millimeter thick MDF boards that I had to join. So let me just go through the process of what I did. So assume the board was, the tabletop had to be 1 meter long by 1/2 meter wide. So what I did in this case is I cut the one board 100% accurately, and I took the second board and I cut it slightly over. So I call it 10 millimeters all the way around. Because when you glue the two parts together, they slip. And when you clamp them, even though you've clamped them accurately, when you walk away, the little fairies come along and they give it a bit of a shove. And when you look at it, the top one has slipped over the bottom one over time because it's slipping. So to circumvent that, you can also get smart. You can just drill 2 dowel holes, and then when you put the board down, you punch the dowels through so it doesn't slip, so you can lock them down, but you still got the edges to worry about because you want those edges perfect. So don't cut them perfect and think you're going to get them perfect. That doesn't happen in woodworking. I can promise you that. So you oversize and then put the board down, drill the 2 holes through, put your dowel in, lift the boards up, put your glue down, put the boards back down again, put the dowels through so that they're locked, that nothing's going anywhere. Then you clamp. Then you pack everything you can on top of it. Best first prize if you can drive your car over it, because that's the best weight you can put on it. And then all this gunk and everything's glue. Just don't worry about what happens on the edges. Then you clean everything up afterwards, and then you take your router and the accurate sized board, you use that as the template to cut the second one out. When you finish cutting that off, you won't see where the 2 parts actually joined once you put paint or whatever over it. Does that make sense to you? So you oversize it and then you trim it off. And that's what this router will do for you. Eh? So needless to say, when I delivered it, the thing was 10 times the weight of the original. So it took 3 people to get that in through the door into her house. But by the time I left, she had packed all her wine in and everything. Oh, she's a brilliant woman, but honestly, that was a job. Okay. You guys happy with that? I think you're kind of getting a bit of an awareness to what you can do with your router, that this is not just a tool for doing edging. Eh? So a little bit more than that. All right, flatten a bowed surface. Okay, so we saw this with the sled. There you can use a straight bit and then cut a... I wouldn't do that, but if that's what you've got, you're capable of doing this. And then you can create yourself a little sled. So, you know what, it's not difficult. You should have these L sections in your shop for many things. I mean, I've got a set of those. So what this will do is it'll act as the fence, and then you create a bit of a crab that you can make up, and that the router can slide up and down across it. Just remember to wax it so it can slide easily for yourself. And then it fits between the two rails, and then you run it over your piece of wood. Just level it, remember to, and then put the blocks in there with hot glue. So put hot glue down, make a little block with a corner cut out, and stick it so that it doesn't move around. And then, you know, wedge it to see. You can see there's a slight crown in here. Can you see that? There's a slight crown. Now you're going to flatten it, and then you'll turn it over, and it'll be a cup. Again, hook it, and then you can do the other side. You can flatten that board down, okay, quite nicely for yourself. All right, so again, you can use it for that. I've not done that, okay, to be quite honest, because I have the machinery that I can play around with and work with it, and I work a little bit differently because I have the machinery. But if you don't have the machinery, again, that's what your router can do for you, okay? You can get that success factor. So play around with it, okay? Another thing is, if you are going to flatten bowed surfaces, try and get the widest bit that can do the job for you. I mean, obviously that's going to reduce the time. If you use a 10 millimeter bit, you're going to be there all day over 2 meters. But if you get yourself a 50 millimeter diameter bit, not on a 1/4 inch shank, on a 1/2 inch shank, you'll be pretty safe. And then run it through, it's going to go a lot faster. Look, you still have to clean up and polish afterwards because they're sagging. And so the more you press down, it's going to create a little bit of a deeper cut, you know, by about a fraction of a millimeter. So you're going to have to sand that all down again afterwards. Okay, so there's still work to be done. Okay, but at least you can meet the main objective, and that's your project completion. Right, you can also do smooth cuts on complex shapes. So, you know, you can make up, so generally, like in my case, we make up a template out of MDF for a client. We'll draw it up in CAD, send it off to a guy, he'll cut it out with a CNC, makes the template for us. We've got 6 chairs to do. And then we'll make the chairs, and we'll use that MDF template in the same way as that straight edge that we use to cut the straight length of wood. Remember, we used that guide. So the templates will become the guide for you to work with. So you use the same process. So again, you use a pattern bit, which is the bearing on the top. And then what you'll do is you will take your template, cut your piece of wood out. Now, if you've got a router, I'm almost certain you can afford a jigsaw. And a jigsaw is an extremely versatile tool in the shop. I use a jigsaw on a regular basis. So what you're going to do is you'll take your template, place it over the piece of wood you want to make your article out of. You'll draw the line on it, okay? Then you take your jigsaw and you'll cut out as much as you can close to the line. So you want about 2 or 3 millimeters away from the line, okay? Anything more than that, you're going to start causing a lot of work for yourself, because when you come to doing the routing stage, place your template back on there. You can see they just screwed it down. And then with your pattern bit, you're now going to go and run around and cut that whole pattern out with that pattern bit, okay? And it'll cut it out properly for you. If the wood's too thick, what do? Take the template off, and maybe you'll get that extra bit. And what if it's still too thick? Well, then you'll have to get not a pattern bit, but a pilot bit. That means the bearing is at the top. So in other words, yeah. Okay. And you'll use that. So turn the piece over, and then the bottom piece will have the template section for you, and you'll cut the balance out. Does that make sense? All right. So you'll need 2. You'll need that, and then you'll need... So that's the first one. That's the template bearing. So the bearing runs against the template, cuts the piece out. The wood's too long. Turn the wood over. That will then pick up the bottom part and then cut the balance out for you. Does that make sense? All right. There we go. All righty. So that's what you're going to play out. And, of course, it'll do the job for you. So what's nice is, and it's great because there are a couple of guys in the country that will sell templates of furniture to you with 6 millimeter MDF. They'll sell it as a kit for you. And then you can grab those and build up chairs and furniture and whatever the case may be. So, I mean, it's like in our case, I will model a piece of furniture, I'll make a small scale of the piece of furniture for the client. They can have a look at it, especially when it's the really expensive stuff. Make a model of it, give it to them, and they say, yes, okay, they like that. They like the layout and the drawers and the curves and whatever the case may be. Change this, change that. And then we'll go back And then we'll make templates. If you've got to make more than one of them, if you've got to make 4 or 5. Look, if you've got to do 2 of these things, you make a template. Okay? You've got to just get that into your head. Templates are the biggest thing you've got to work with. Okay? Then you start making your stuff with the templates, and then off you go. CNC guys will cut it out for you for a couple of bucks. Okay? Give them a sheet of the material, and they'll cut it out for you. Or you make your own if you've got the time. So it's almost like a pattern maker, if you think of it, in the days of yesterday, where the guys would have to do it for machining on metalwork. You've got a pattern maker that does a similar thing. That's what these guys are becoming to you now, is a pattern maker. So you take them your pattern, they will cut it out for you on the MDF, give it back to you, and then off you go and you make the thing. And they do it on CAD. So it's easy. If something has to get a little bit bigger, you click on the line and drag the line over, and it'll make it bigger for you by whatever distance. You can specify these distances now. Does that make sense to you? So those are nice things to kind of get you going. What's it, that Adirondack chair, the one that everybody wants to make? Oh, there's a couple of boys that do Adirondack templates, and you can purchase them for a couple of bucks. I mean, I bought just to support a guy. He retired, and in fact, it's still sitting in the plastic. I bought a pack of Adirondack templates from him. It was something stupid, like 420 Rand or something for it. So maybe one day I'll make an Adirondack. Not my favorite chair. I'm a chair crazy guy, but I don't like the Adirondack for many reasons. I don't like it. But maybe one day I'll do it. It might be something that I do enjoy making, so we'll see. Right, okay, here's a nice one for you. So to make trim easily. So I had a scenario where a couple of years ago I did a bathroom renovation, and I asked the tiler to please, it was a concrete slab in an apartment block because it's concrete to the next floor up. So when it was in the bathroom was slight, I don't know why it had an incline on it, but it was a very slight incline. And I asked the tiler to please cut the tiles to meet the roof. So when the job was done, they disappeared. I went in. These gaps like stairs. I was thinking, I asked the guy to please match it up with the incline. So I looked at this and I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And I thought, okay, I'll go and get a piece of trim and then put it on there, get a cornice or whatever from one of those shops, the polystyrene, and stick it up or whatever. And I went back to the shop, and I just finished off some stuff that I did with plywood. And I had 21 millimeter thick plywood, and I looked at the plywood and I thought, you know what, why don't I just cut the pattern on the edge of that plywood, put plaster primer on it, take it back, stick it up, and then paint it. Well, that's exactly what I did. And that's like nearly 20 years later. So there's a guy showing you how to do quarter round. So take the bit that you saw in the previous slide, cut the quarter round on the board, and then put the board through the table saw. If you don't have a table saw, you might have a track saw. Cut it off with a track saw. Then you've got the quarter round that you can now replace at a fraction of the cost. And I'm being serious. I'm not trying to say to you, go and do because it's a nice thing to do. No, you've got quarter rounds that are missing in your house. There's the solution. Okay, husbands, you've got a problem. Or wives, if you are into woodworking. Okay. So there's a solution for you. And it's not just that. I mean, I did that little cornice at the top. It was about that big, probably 50 millimeters I just put an OG on the bottom part. And when you painted it up, it looked like the polystyrene part. I mean, it was made out of plywood. I don't think it would work very well, but it did. And plaster primer. You know what plaster primer is, eh? Seriously. Gosh. Plaster primer, normally when they plaster the walls in your house, they put rhinolite on it. Rhinolite's still powdery. Use plaster primer. It's obviously made with resin, paint resin. It bonds the whole, it's not bonding liquid or whatever. It bonds everything and stabilizes it. And then you paint over that. It's also used as a mask. So if your kid has got a black wall in their room and you want to put a lighter color over it, you put plaster primer down, it acts as a barrier, and then you paint over the top of it, and then it comes out proper. So you don't see the black coming through on the back end, or the red, or the dark green. And plaster primer will also prime the wood. You don't have to go buy wood primer. You prime your wood up with it, and you put your paint over the top of it. It's perfect. Just don't do it on your clear varnish because it won't work. It'll be white. And you can tint plaster primer as well. So if you have got a particular color and you've got a dark color that you want to mask, go get the color that you've made. Ask them just to put a bit of tint in for you, and it'll pre-tint it so you can put your color over the top of it. So plaster primer is a very, very clever product that was ever developed. Okay, so go and have a look at it. I've got a 20 liter that I use for as much of the stuff that I need to. If I've got an MDF cupboard I've got to do, plaster primer it. I'm not going to put the MDF primer on it. It's the same product. They just put a bit of pink dye in it and it looks pink. Wood primer is exactly the same thing. So get smart, okay? But anyway, there you go. Now you know how to make trimming, okay? All right, for little fancy things, okay? So many things you can do. Right, so just a little bit of a trick if you want to do repairs to something, okay? So you want to do a repair or reinforce something. So just to whet your appetite, to give you an idea of what you can do. So when that broken chair comes in with a crack, what you can do is you can route out that area where the crack is. So there's a crack in the middle. And I mean, invariably when you try and glue these things together, it's difficult because there's crud inside it. And you try and clamp it up, in 2 months' time, it's going to crack open again. Now, to stop it from cracking open again, you clamp the chair tight as you can, route out a section, put a piece of wood on top of it, let it dry out. Now, that wood will hold the two parts together. It will never come apart, okay? All right, because there's a massive surface that's going to take care of clamping it and holding it together. So you would do something like that. And I mean, I do furniture restorations. So I do the same thing. You know, put a strip. I don't go as wide as that. I'll probably go about that, about 100 mil. So 50 on either side. Make a slot and then put the wood in, clamp it up, put the wood in, and then leave it, let it dry, and then overnight take it apart. That will never come apart. Never ever crack again. Okay? So think of that on a large scale and think of it on a small scale. So you've got a tabletop that's starting to get a check in it or a crack in it on the side. You want to stop that thing from cracking. They put what do they call a butterfly or a bow tie in there. Well, how do they do it? They do it with a router. They make the butterfly with a little jig. They make a little template and they run it and they make a little butterfly, cut a piece of wood out that's exactly the same shape and put it back in there and it holds that piece together. Doesn't let it crack any further. So now you're starting to see the potential of what your router can actually start doing for you. You know, there's a ton of things. It's the most valuable toy that you're ever going to have in your shop, or tool for that matter. It is a toy. But it's going to work for you. It's going to do what you want. Eh? All right. Any questions? Anybody? All right, so then just to take it a bit further, for arcs and circles, that's what your router can do. So your router can actually cut this out for you. Okay? Don't have to go buy a table saw to do it. Don't have to go and buy a band saw to do it. Your router will do that. In fact, your router is the best tool to do that circle, to cut those circles out. All right, within reason. You know, you can use a hole saw kit, which can take you up to about, I think, 94 millimeters in diameter. The router can take over from there onwards, okay, with a proper decent jig. Will cut that circle out for you. A router will do it. So typically what we would do in this case is we would use a spiral bit, which is a solid carbide bit. You either get them down cut or up cut. In this case, it doesn't really matter. Well, it does. I would rather go down cut because then I don't have splintering coming up from the top. I would have it all compressed so it keeps it nice and clean, okay? And the edge will come out absolutely perfect for you and nice and smooth. You wouldn't even have to sand it. The last thing you may want to do is just put a little round over on the edge and then that's it. You're ready to go. So that's what you can work with in this case, okay? So what you would do is you would make yourself a trammel, which is a piece of wood that you would have a little slot in here that you can mount your router to it. And then there's a little pivot point in here for that distance. And you can put that down, you can run around. That's a simple trammel out of that piece of wood. And this is exactly what you'll be doing here. So here's a bar counter that's laminated out of a couple of segments and then cut. And then the guy is now busy with an upcut or downcut bit with a trammel that they've made to cut that arc for that. This could be a bar counter. It could be an arc for an entrance to a big building or whatever the case may be. But that's what you're capable of doing with your router. There he is with the router, busy doing the job. So you've got all that potential. So now you can make those round tables that you wanted to, okay? The kit, most of them, the routers get delivered with that kit. And that will kind of help you out, okay? All right, so there you go. All right, so the one that I've always kind of mentioned over and over is to take the edge off a piece of wood is with a round over bit. So this is the bit that I have in my little palm router. It's permanently there. I know it's naughty, but it's permanently stuck in there. It could be welded in for all I care. Because whenever I want it, it's cordless. I put a battery in it, and I quickly run around and I do the edges, and everything's complete and done. Okay. So you just want to knock off, just put a little round over. You have a look at this table here; it's got a round over on it. These tables don't have it, but I think the edges might have it. Okay. Got a little round over. You get the round over at different radiuses, from a 3 millimeter up to a 25 millimeter radius round over. So you choose what you want to work with, okay? And then knock the edge off, and then off you go. And the little bearing will keep it nice and tidy for you, so it won't go too far or too deep. All right, so there's the sharp piece of wood, as they're showing there down at the picture, just to kind of make it look nice and appealing. And then the hint that they give you here is on your door. And I'm surprised people don't know this. Put a round over underneath the door so that when you open the door, it doesn't snag the carpet. Because that square edge always snags the carpet and it rips the carpet up or it splinters the door. Put a round over on it and it goes over nicely. It doesn't snag anything or catch anything. So a little round over will do the job quite easily for it. It's a very easy thing to do. It's a quick thing to do. So nothing will go wrong. I see you. Why are you looking at me? These are the things you got to do. Yeah, my mate. At least you got your work cut out for you. All right, so those are some of the things you can play around with. And there's more. You know, it just doesn't stop there. It goes on and on. There's a ton of things to do with a router. So that's just working with it up in the air. When you start putting it under the table, there's a whole lot of other things you can start playing around with and doing. Okay, so you know it's that versatile. So you have, if you've got a router, it's one of the most versatile tools you'll have in the shop. And by what you've seen now, you can realize quite clearly you're quite capable of producing some fine furniture just with a router, a jigsaw, a handsaw, and a drill with some drill bits, and off you go. You're good to go. You can do some fancy stuff. Okay, so for a little bit of money, you can go a long way. All right. After this comes the advanced routing. Okay, so there's routing level 1 where you'll do the practical. That's the basics, practical. Teach you how to cut and put roundovers and whatever. Then the router level 2, that's circle cutting, template routing, practical. So you'll actually get to cut a circle. And then router level 3, that's the dark science. That's using the guide bushes on a router. So come and visit us for that, and then we'll show that to you. Are there any questions at this stage? Anybody? Yes. Mm. Yeah, look, okay, so yeah, look, okay, so if you're in a production shop, the spiral down cut's going to pay itself off because you don't have to go back in and knock off the furry bits that were made. You don't have to take a piece of sandpaper, like there's a bit of a furry bit on, you won't be able to see it from there, but you'll have to knock that off with a bit of sandpaper. The down cut's going to do that for you automatically because it's going to pull those bits and the chips and everything down, the fibers down. So it's going to be clean. You can then slot the board in with whatever fixture fasteners you've got, and off you go, job done. So that's your workflow in a shop, a business shop. But if you're at your shop, they're expensive. They're 3,500 Rand for a bit. How many of these bits can you buy for that bit? And then a little bit of sandpaper on a sanding block. So you've got to weigh up the pros and cons. Where are you and what are you doing? What works for you? To put an arc like that, if I had to do it, I'm only going to use a down cut because I want a clean finish at the end of it. I want to just put the little round over on it just to cut the edge, smooth it off, and I don't even want to lick it with sandpaper. And then I want to hit it with varnish and I want to send it out the door. Okay. And even for that case, for example, if you were doing oak or you were doing kiat or any of the hardwoods that chip out, then a down cut or upcut is going to be beneficial to you. So you've got to weigh up the pros and cons in terms of, can you afford this in the first instance? Is it worth the money? It's pointless having that bit and it's sitting up in a box somewhere and nobody's touching it, and you use it once a year. It's an expensive bit, eh? So you've got to kind of weigh that up. For the most part, I think a standard bit will get the job done for you. And when you start moving into the more fine furniture part of life, and people are now paying top dollar for the pieces that you're making, and you want to get things out the door, then you start looking at those bits. Okay, if that makes sense to you. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, look, if you make the slot for a number 20, so the first thing is you cut the slot in the side, put your number 20 in and take a pencil and draw a line. Then rotate it and put the biscuit back in again. And if the two lines overlap, it's by about 3 millimeter, it's deep enough. Okay. And then you can dry fit from there on, or fit and then glue and go from there. Okay. So I always do that on the first instance. Before I do all the slots, I do the first one on a piece of scrap, make sure I got it to the right distance that I want from top to bottom, and then check that the depth is correct. And once I'm happy with that, dial it in, and then I do all of them from there. Does that make sense to you? And yes, you're right. The minute you put glue with it, everything goes loose, it goes slippy, and then things don't fit properly. So you really got to make an effort that you do things properly. Basically like a zipper, start on one end and put them together, clamp, 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 clamp as you go down. Okay, you'll have to if you're trying to level the boards out as well. Okay. so that you start at the bottom. Just you don't over tighten it fully. Just tighten slightly so it just catches it, and then you stitch them together as you go down. Put a clamp stitch together until you get to the end. Lift the board up or drop the board down to try and squeeze them in to level things out. You mean if I'm going to say, for example, a number of boards? Look, it depends. So I'll give you my workflow. Is there a question off the... Okay, I'll answer it now. I'll give you my workflow. So if I have to build a... Let's go really crazy. I'm going to do a 1.5 meter wide table. Okay? So what I will do is I will laminate... So first of all, I'll take all my boards and lay them out to have a look and see that I'm happy with the design of the grain. Okay? Let's go work with something a little bit more complex now. Let's use Kiot with the brown and white. Now you've got to try and make sure that the brown and white blends together properly, because you don't want to have one bit of white here and then a bit of white down there. You want to try and keep the white together somewhere along the line, and the brown will sort itself out. So once you've done your layout of the board, you then also, when you're busy with that, you've also got to look for cupping and crowning. So you want to try and get... So the cup and a crown, you want to try and get opposing. So when the two come together, the thinking is that the physics will pull them together so they remain flat. Okay, as opposed to putting the two together like that, because now you know you're going to have a definite cup. How are you going to straighten that? And don't come and tell me to use channel, because I've never done that. I want to do it the way it should be done. So I'm going to use that to get that effect. Okay, if you're making sense of it. That's before I've even started working or milling the boards. Okay. Then what I'll do is I take the boards and I mark the edge of the boards, A, B, C, D. And I take it off over to the thicknesser and I go thickness my boards, both sides, until I've got them to the thickness I want. Then I bring them back again and I line them up. Maybe this time the tension's released from the planing. Maybe the one that was like that and the one that was like that, maybe this one has gone flat, but this one's still cupped. Then I'm okay, because now I'm going to put the flat one there and a flat one there. I might still have to move around a little bit. Once I've done that, if I still have that scenario, I'm going to have to put biscuits or something in between it. But then I only do it on the boards where I need it. I'm not going to do every single board. I only do it if there's a distinct cup and that one's flat and I need to get that one up. I'm not going to flip the board over. I'm going to leave the board exactly like that, but I'm going to put biscuits just in the zone where I need them. Then I dry fit. Put everything together, I put them in the clamps and I dry fit them. I put the clamps together, press it up so I can check to see that all my joints are nice and they're even, and then also make sure that this scenario has leveled out. If it's leveled out, then I'm happy with it. Now I'll unclamp them and I'll put everything on edge and I'll start putting my glue in and I'll put them together. Do I do them all together? It depends on what I'm working with. But for the most part, I'm a bit of a cheat code guy. I'll do them 2 by 2. Put 2 together, 2 together, 2 together. But I only clamp them 2 by 2. So I'm not going to put 4 boards or 6 boards and then only glue 2 and then clamp the whole lot together, because the chances of them jumping up, it's going to happen on me. So I'd rather do them 2 by 2. The other reason is, if there was any board that was a little bit higher than the other, I can put it through the drum sander, so I can level that out. But that means I have to push the other boards through the drum sander as well. Because if I don't, then I'm forced to use biscuits on every single one to try and bring them to the same level. And when I put my biscuits in, I must be honest, I don't really care too much where they sit in the board. I just make sure that they level. So what do? I move all the boards over on their face, because that's the top side for me. And then I take the biscuit jointer flat on the table and run it up against the face. But be careful, because now the boards are crowning. Where they were cupping on the other side, they'll be crowning. So when you put the biscuit in, the biscuit will telegraph the crown. So when you put them together, you'll actually see it crowning. That means you must put weight on top of the stuff, so you can put the biscuit jointer flat against it. Now you're probably saying to me, but why don't you do it from the top? I found it's more accurate if I work off the face of the table into the wood than working from the top. For some reason, it always gives me a better accuracy. Never been able to work that out. But please put weight on it or clamp it down on the edge of the table. So clamp, 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 so you can get the thing done. Then turn it back and then just 2 by 2. So when those 2 are done and those 2 are done, I bring them together. I've got more control over what I'm doing. It'll take a bit longer, but I'm going to get a better result at the end. Taking and putting 8 of them together and then clamping them. You've got to have calls that you've got to put over the top and all that kind of stuff, so it gets more complicated. If it slips, there's no coming back from it. No. Then you've got to recut and then rejoin. No. So I'll do 2 by 2. That's my workflow. Okay? So if I make a table, I always use a D3, waterproof. So that'll be Alkaline Ultra, Sudol's D3, Jarvit's D3 that you can get from Galmar. I heard somebody say something. Sudol, Jarvit, Kleiberit, I will use the D3s, okay, for the tables. Because the chances of water getting on that table and something happening, it's not going to cause a disaster, but it will give me a peace of mind, okay? I would use that. You know what, most of the times I use a D3, the Alkaline Ultra, or I'll use the Alkaline Professional. But I do use the Sudol as well. It depends on the wood that I'm working with, okay? Because the Alkaline will leave a dark line, whereas the Sudol will do a clear line. So if I'm busy doing oak, I'll use the Sudol for the oak, okay? And that'll give me a clear line. What? Never heard of it. Question from the gallery? The chap's name? Sia, with regards to your question on the guide bushings, so the guide bushings, the diameter, the inside and outside diameter will be standard across all manufacturers. Okay, so you'll get a 10 millimeter outside diameter, and depending on the thickness of the wall, you might end up with a whatever. But so the internal diameter is not a major factor to play, but the outside diameter is more important. So, for example, you'll have a 10, you'll have a 12, you have a 13, a 15, or whatever. So there's different manufacturers. So between Bosch, between Milescraft, and whoever else makes guide bushings, they'll have the same diameter. But as for the router, there will be bushings made to match the router. So if you look at the Bosch has got a particular type of connector, which has almost become a standard in the industry, because you can get a jig that will fit into any other router and will take the Bosch bushings, okay, so it'll fit them. But it becomes quite a complex thing. So, for example, Festool will have one type. They will use the Lee variation of the bushing, and you'll have another router company so for example, that will make their own type of bushing. So like, for example, Ryobi will have a particular type of bushing that you can't use on any other router. So the more common one would be to get the Bosch jig that will fit on most of the other routers. I hope I'm answering your question. If I'm not, maybe just reach out to us and then I can give you a bit more detail on that. But to answer your question in a very simple form, they can be brand specific. So Festool will make their bushings for their machine. Bosch will make their bushings for their machine, and they'll try and see if they can try and grab in other couple of router manufacturers to try and use their bushings. Okay, so it does become a bit of a dark science, but reach out to us if I haven't given you a proper answer, or put it in the comments below, and then I'll reach out to you, because then I'll pick up your email address and I can get hold of you. Okay, I hope that helps you. Okay, that's on the bushings. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, how are we doing for time? Hello. Yes. Yeah, you don't want to put glue in the slot, and you don't want to put glue on the biscuits, because that's going to cause that little bit of swelling that you're going to shave off, which will create a dent. Okay, but you just want to put it on the face. And not be lazy. You want to save on the glue and you want to get the job done. So you butter up the two faces, drop your little strip in there, and then stitch together. Start at the one end and start stitching it together. Okay, so clamp on that side. You may want to put a clamp on the other end, but don't clamp it up. You just want to use it so that the boards don't spread out, okay, because that can happen to you sometimes. All right. But yeah, laminating, gosh, I think I've made more tables than I care to remember. It's an endless story. Anybody else? No other questions? Can't be it. Seriously, can't be it. I'm disappearing off the screen. I'll be back. Yeah, okay. Right. Okay, I'm back. There was a question about freehand routing and center finding. So for the freehand routing, I don't do freehand routing at all. There's some guys that I know that do freehand routing, and they're very, very good with it. Put a V-bit in and they can carve anything out of that piece of wood. So they've got themselves routers that are easy enough to move around and too lightweight to work with. And they generally don't grab a palm router. They actually work with these boys because they've got a better grip down at the bottom here, and they can steer this around and do what they need to do. So yes, freehand routing is a thing. You can do that, but obviously you're not going to plunge deep with it because that'll have its own set of problems. You need to have the handles. So you're going to make a small, probably a 2mm or 3mm with a V bit, and you'll do the freehand routing with that, if that answers the question for you. Now for the centering, is that what you're asking for? Yeah. So underneath, well, not necessarily the pins will come into here. There might be a fitting plate that you put on that'll have 2 pins offset so that you can center it on a board. So in other words, imagine like that. So it'll center it so that you can then get the center easy enough for, in case like you mentioned, the door lock, to make a recess for a door lock and put that in place. So that you'll have to look to find out if your router either has that plate or if that's got those 2 pins that you can actually put on the router. You'll need to find that out specifically. However, you can get add-on kits, like, for example, Marscraft. They're very good with that. They make these base plates. And those base plates will have the little attachment that you can put on. And they've got the base that they work with. So one of my routers has got a Marscraft lock base on it. So I can fit it between all their jigs that they've got. And that works quite nicely, particularly the circle jig as well. That works quite nicely. Okay, so yes, you must look at, just find out what your router is capable. But the Marscraft jigs will fit on any router. I have not come across a router where they don't fit on. The Triton. Okay, all right, Triton. That's the old Tritons, not the new ones. The old Triton. Yeah. Okay, but all right. I've not come across anything that it doesn't fit on. Everything fits on that turn lock base. It really works well. So it's worth having a look at it. There's something there that takes your fancy. Sometimes jigs are required. I mean, you can't do absolutely everything without a jig. You know, here and there is a jig. You've got to do a cheat code and get it going. The jigs are there for a reason. You know, so make sure it's a jig that you need, not the jig you want. Okay. Yeah, Ryobi, easy. Yeah, in fact, I first put my turn lock onto the Ryobi. And then I thought I'd leave it there. And I thought, no, I had another router that was a little bit more better suited for it. And then they'll have a little centering pin that you can put in to center everything properly for you and so on. Okay? All right. On that, yeah, because it's a universal adapter, it won't be able to match what you've got on the straight edge. Okay, so it makes sense. Just one or two quick things for you. Please, when you're working on the fence, if you have a look at the router, you'll see the router's got a flat side and then a semicircular. You don't run this against the fence. You run that against the fence because it'll keep it equidistant from the bit every time. If you run that against the fence, if you have a slight wobble, you're going to go off from the fence. That means your line's going to go off. Okay, this is not for running on the fence side. That you run on the fence side. So it's easier. You can hit it like a Formula 1 motor car and just ram it down. As long as you stay on that round part, you're safe. Hit it on the flat part, you're going to have a problem. Okay, what is that flat part for? So this thing doesn't roll off the table. Okay, just quickly, question I do get asked, and it's not over here but on the groups. Which router should you get? So there's a little palm router, okay? That's the baby, the little cute toy. I'm not going to get one and enjoy it. It's worth it. But you shouldn't be using it forever and ever. You should grow up and grow out of it. If you want to get something, start with that. This is the best thing you can get your hands on. Good price point. It's got everything. It's got 9 turret stops. So 3 times 9 is 27. You can go 27 millimeters deep. This is the best thing ever. Start over there, lock, speed control, plunge, lock, unlock, plunge, let go, lock. This is so intuitive. This is the thing to get hold of. This is what you should start off with, not this. Okay? You'll get this if you need it. Not this. Sorry, not this. This is the toy you want to start off with. It's a little bit scary. It looks daunting. It looks big. It looks massive. Looks like it could cause problems. Safe as houses when you've got both hands on it. Okay? All right. That's why it's got two handles. If you're busy handling it like this, well, good for you, mate. Good for you. By the way, this one has got a bushing in it. This is the standard bushing for Bosch. And this is what their guide bushing looks like. So see us. This is their one. Okay, it's got the little round edges. But you can get these Bosch bushings and a jig that will fit on any other router. And I think the Lee, the same guys who make the Lee routers and jigs and so on, and dovetail jigs, they make a little jig that you can purchase, and you can put this in to lock it in. This is the best way to work with it. Okay, so you can buy them as a kit, and I would rather invest in that. That's why this and my other Bosch are the ones I work with. I just need to buy this. I'm using the Marscraft bushings with the jig, and it works just as well, but I'd like to get this. And then, of course, they come in different depths. I would suggest that you get one that's about 5 or 6 millimeter with the bushing edge, not this one that's got, I think this was about 17 millimeters. It's far too long. I mean, it makes sense if you're using 6 millimeter MDF for a template. This is way too tall. It's going to stand up and you're not going to get the correct result. So be clever. Do a bit of research on the bushing side of things. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to throw that in. I'm not selling these products. I'm just trying to tell you. It's cute. But it's not the toy. You're going to overwork this thing, and it's probably more dangerous to work with this than with the medium-sized router because you've got both handles on. Even though this one does come with a plunge base. Okay, it does come with a plunge base like that, and it's a cordless. Oh, by the way, there's the centering pin. So the centering pin is a 1/4 inch. You put it into the router, so you can center. If you take the plate off, you can use that to recenter the plate. Okay, the book will tell you what this is all about. So yes, it has got a plunge on it, and it's got a fixed base on it, okay? But it just doesn't have the oomph. I mean, and then why are you going cordless, if I may ask? For what reason? Because it's cute. Seriously. You know, when you run out of battery power, now you've got to stop and wait for it to charge up, unless you go buy another battery. Okay? Then you've got 2 batteries. And then when you run out of power on 2 batteries, because they don't charge up equally as fast, then you still got to sit and wait. So you go buy 3 batteries, and hopefully you get around the problem. Come on, man. These toys versus this in terms of price. Tell you what, this one will be 30% cheaper than that. Okay. So tell me which one you want to go for. These are going, routers and things are on special today. So the Bosch Golf 30 130, the one over there, is going for 2,100. That's not bad. And then the Handheld trimmer, 3,400 Rand. A little bit over a third. Okay. Which one are you going to take? And don't tell me because of Eskom. All right. Still got to charge the battery. How's it, Mike, my mate? Okay. Any other questions? Because when you go, there's no coming back. Hello. So this comes with a 1/2 inch and a 8 millimeter. No, it doesn't come with a 1/4 inch. But just the upside. The 1/2 inch has got its place and it's used blah, 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 blah. I like a 1/2 inch now. I really do. It gives me the security I want because of the way I cut and whatever. It was primarily because the dovetail jigs used 1/2 inch router bits. Okay. So nowadays they make a 1/4 inch dovetail bit. So there's no need to go that route anymore. Okay. But definitely I would have a 1/2 inch in my arsenal. There's days where you're going to say, so if you're doing that round over, for example, you don't want to plunge, you just want to clean off, then a 1/2 inch. So can you imagine that nice long 1/2 inch bit cutting through a 40 millimeter tabletop in one swoop? Can you imagine that? Try. Okay, does that make sense? There was another question. No? Are you just faking it? No, you can't. So it's you can get a 6 1/4 inch and 8 millimeter, nothing more. Yes, so you can go down to 6 millimeter. You won't go smaller than that, okay? Because then you're going to Dremel territory. It's a different world. Dremel have got their own little router, by the way, and I've got one, and I use it from time to time for some little fine work that I need to get done. Okay. Anybody else? Yes. Oh gosh, you'll need to, are you on the mailing list? Okay, all right. I don't know. They schedule me when they're in the mood, I think. Yeah, fine. No problem. Yep, no problem. Just watch your perspex for speed, okay? All right, sharp cutters. Okay. Yeah, it's not companies, it's basically individuals. So it's not like, you know, for example, like Rockler would supply all those templates. We're just not there. You know, they could possibly keep templates here, but I don't know, it just doesn't gel, eh? So you've got to join up with some woodworkers association, and some guy in the association will have it. So who's from Pretoria Woodworkers? Anybody? Yeah, okay, there we go. Yeah, Pretoria Woodworkers, they've got this Leon, I think it does the templates for the Adirondack and a couple of other things, yeah. So he's the go-to guy. So come and see me, give me your name, and then I can put you in contact with Leon. Okay, he can help you out there. Oh, okay. Oi. Yo, that's pricey. Yeah, so somebody should club together, get one set, and then make another set, and then sell. No, you shouldn't be doing that. No, that is crazy money. I'm sorry to say. Hey, no, then I'm not surprised when he doesn't get a go. Anybody else? I saw another hand. Something. Anybody? Keith, what's your question? Is that it? You guys done? No, I think he's on his own, eh? Okay. Okay. All right, folks. I think if there's no other further questions, then I think that's it. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming along. It's a nice turnout. I'm happy to see you all. You obviously got the notification via email and on the WhatsApp. Which one was the WhatsApp group? I just want to get a feel which one works the most. The WhatsApp group. Facebook. Oh, you're on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook at all. Email. So it's sort of a hybrid. I'm a nuisance on WhatsApp. Okay. I think I'm the most prolific poster on Facebook. Now, why are you laughing at, mate? It's the truth. It's like confession for me this morning. Okay, all right. Yeah, no, fine. Folks, okay, all right. Okay, for the guys out there, I hope you enjoyed the show. All right, if there's anything you want to recapture or go over again, it's on the YouTube channel. Go and have a look at Hardware Center there. You'll find this will be live up, will no longer be live. It will be there for replay. So you can go, if you like the sound of my voice, you can go and listen to it again. It does put people to sleep, I believe, so save yourself on drugs, sleep medication. It may work for you. Otherwise, for the folks out there, thank you so much for coming on board and watching.